My father was like the Ted Lasso of the army.
Shit.
He was the soccer manager, player, and coach.
Really?
Yeah. So, but now I've watched Ted Lasso, I know he's nothing like my father. So I was telling my father this, and my dad said, "You last 2 minutes." That was his response. So for me, it was like, well, there's no point in arguing with him. The best course of action, I say, is action itself. And so I did the SBS one, and then I did the SAS one a week later, and they're passing them both, and they said, "Yeah, you're ready for selection now." I remember being told on selection, be the grey man. Being the grey man means basically just flying under the radar. Don't bring any attention to yourself for good reasons or bad reasons. I hadn't planned to leave. And, without sounding like Liam Neeson, with our particular skill sets, we tend to go into the security sector. When we start selection, we sign the Official Secrecy Act. That basically means...
Well, you're out now, so you can say anything.
Well, no, it's for life, yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen, as always, it's both an honor and a pleasure to welcome my next guest to the podcast. He's a former British Special Forces soldier and was one of the very first Army members to join the SBS, or Special Boat Service, which is an exclusive counterterrorism unit of the Royal Navy. He served in Royal Engineers and SBS for 16 years. He's a two-time world record holder cycling the Pan American Highway, which is 14,000 fucking miles from Argentina to Alaska. Throughout his esteemed military career, he's conducted deployments to overseas hostile environments and been involved in counterterrorism operations. He's traveled to some of the toughest places on Earth. He's an author of the book Relentless, which recounts his experiences and life as an SBS soldier. And when faced with the impossible, he proves that anything is possible. He single-handedly is responsible for the evacuation of the Canadian Embassy in 2014, rescuing 4 diplomats and 18 military personnel in Israel back in October. Within 24 hours of the Hamas attack, he flew into Israel, planned and executed the evacuation of over 200 people, including 14 American students from a Bible college in Jerusalem, which is more than the U.S. government did. He's recently awarded the MBE, or Member of the Order of the British Empire, on the King's Birthday Honours List, which I can't wait to talk to you about that. Yeah. He lives by the Special Forces ethos of the unrelenting pursuit of excellence. Ladies and gentlemen, our favorite Brit, welcome to the stage, Dean Stott.
Thank you very much, Mike.
Thanks for coming. It's like reading a fucking phone book for your intro with all the stuff that you've done. And I mean, it's a ton to talk about, lots of exciting shit. And it's also pretty varied, which I think is cool. And obviously the Pan American thing, which we'll get into, is quite outside the wheelhouse in terms of military stuff, but it's in that same vein of just extreme, pushing yourself to the outer limit. But seeing that you have some pretty big ticket, very small in terms of numbers, whether it's yourself or a very small group of people doing some pretty big things in a lot of different places, which is pretty awesome. So I can't wait to get into it. But quick lightning round. What's the last full book that you've read?
Last full book was, which was the last one? It's in my bag, actually. It's that good I forgot.
Yeah. So good I can't remember.
It's that good I can't remember. What's it? Something to do with habits, anyway.
Yeah. All right. We'll call it the habit book. What's something you wish you were better at, other than remembering what book you've read?
I think I was better at being present in the moment and probably celebrating some of my successes. Yeah. Rather than just looking at the next thing I'm going to do.
Yeah. Do you find that? It seems pretty standard in high drive individuals. You see the same thing in dogs, strangely, but is that it's the pursuit that's the enjoyment and the dopamine, like the actual achieving it is kind of almost a letdown, or it's really cool, really, really short, and then it's like this dopamine crash almost.
Yeah, I think, I have an analogy that the body is like a flowing river that it needs to keep moving. As soon as you become stagnant and stop, you become ill. Yeah. And so for me, always need to be pursuing something next. That's one of the things I missed when I left the Special Forces. I got injured out, is the fact that, as you know what you're doing for the next 2 years. Yeah. You have a plan and things like that. And so I like to have that plan. But, a lot of people have told me more recently, is like, enjoy this moment, because me and my wife, we're business partners, do everything together, and we actually don't. And so something we're sort of going to take on board moving forward. And we now have a family as well. And so, we don't. Atomic Habits by James Clear is the book.
All right.
There we go.
Yeah. It came in handy. If time travel were possible, where and when would you go?
Wow. I'd love to go forward. And I'd love to see what my children and my grandchildren do, and see if anything that me and my wife have done has rubbed off on them.
Yeah.
If they picked up some of our traits,
Yeah.
our good traits and our bad traits, and learn from them.
Yeah. That's a great answer, man. It's the first answer like that anybody's given. Almost always it's going back to either to see Jesus or Roman Empire, fight with the Spartans, or World War II. I mean, it's typically historical and big ticket items, but that's a cool answer.
I think obviously if people want to go back, you can't change the past.
Yeah.
But so I'd like to go forward and see what sort of legacy I've left for my children.
Yeah, for sure. Do you have a favorite quote?
Ooh, do I have a favorite quote? There's a quote I used to use a lot, which I love. Anticipation is worse than participation, which I tell people. But I did meet an old friend of mine from the Royal Engineers, actually just before I left the SBS, and he said, "You make your own luck." And for me, that always stuck with me. I was like, okay, no one's going to hand it out to you. If you're going to do something, you got to reach out for it yourself.
Yeah, I think Billy Zane, whatever this character's name in Titanic, says that, right? A real man makes his own luck.
Yeah.
You live in America now, or for the most part, or full time?
Me and my wife, when I met my wife, she'd done about 3 or 4 road trips around America. Loved America. I'd obviously worked a lot here with the American Special Forces Group, doing a lot of training, especially down Coronado Island. Then we used to do the Spectre gunships down in Fort Lauderdale and Cannon. And so I loved America as well. And actually, when we got together, it was one of our future ambitions was to move over to America one day. And then we blinked. It was actually 2020 in the middle of COVID. We blinked and we had a 9-year-old daughter and a 4-year-old son. And we're like, wow. I said, when did that happen? And so for COVID actually was the first time that we'd managed to pause. Everything was on pause. We managed to catch up with everything. And then we just sort of sat down together and was like, well, if we blink again, it's going to be another 10 years. So I know COVID wasn't great for everyone, but for us, we like to take advantage or see a positive from a negative. And I said, well, look, my wife said, well, let's look at America. During that period, we weren't actually allowed to fly straight from UK into the US. You had to have a 14-day soak period in another country. So we flew into Mexico City and went on holiday in Mexico. And my wife's then looking on Zillow, looking at some rentals. And we started in Los Angeles. We had a few friends in California, so that was the reason we went there first. But the school ratings were a lot better down in Orange County. So my wife found a rental property, booked it, and we just flew in. We had 2 kids, 8 bags, and no plan. We now have 3 kids, more than 8 bags, and still no plan.
Wow. Still in that same area?
Still in the same area. We just got our green card approved in January. That's quite a lengthy and expensive process, but it's worth it in the end. So that now obviously gives us opportunity to look at purchasing properties. So although we landed in California, whether we stay there or not, I don't know. So we're now looking at a few of the states.
Yeah. I mean, if you were in Mexico City, instead of flying, you could have just walked right the fuck across and you would have gotten hooked up better than doing it the right way.
You'll be surprised the amount of people that have actually messaged me and said, no, thank you for doing it the right way. I was, of course I do it the right way. Probably $100,000 down and a lengthy process, but it's worth it.
Yeah. So living in America, obviously California is a little tougher, but can you have a concealed carry? I mean, can you carry weapons, and do you?
I'm going through the process at the moment. So I'm sponsored by Staccato Pistol here in Texas. Obviously, a Staccato in California is quite difficult to get, but we're going through that process. So it has to actually go through the law enforcement for 90 days and then come to me. So the aim is to get a concealed carry in California, and as you know, it's probably the hardest state in the states to get, and then would then obviously reach out to Utah and then get a few others. But that's my aim, is to have a concealed carry.
And I assume you would carry a Staccato if you could carry?
Of course, it's the Ferrari of the pistol wheel.
Yeah. Guys, real quick, I've recently launched Patreon for the all-inclusive mic drop experience. This goes above and beyond just ad-free. Yes, you are getting ad-free episodes, but you're getting before and after bonus footage of myself and the guest in studio, in many instances outside of the studio, doing jiu-jitsu, dog stuff, car, motorcycle, recovery, fitness, lifestyle, all kinds of different things. All the different things that I have going on are included in that Patreon page. We're releasing content multiple times a day, every single day. And I want to offer that to you guys. Just go to my Patreon page. The link is in every description or any platform that I'm on, and come enjoy that experience with me. That content is for you guys. It's what you want to see. It's about you. It's about what world you want to peek into in terms of all the different things that I have my hands in, and we're bringing that to you guys just for you. And I want to take one quick second to just say thank you to everybody who already has signed up. Without your support, we couldn't do what we do for you. So thank you to you guys, and I look forward to seeing you in there. What are the two key components for canine success? That's effective training and proper nutrition. Fueled by Team Dog brings those two components to your family and best friend. The perfect nutritional balance that results in a higher mental acuity, energy, overall vitality, and even an improved appearance. Every product you will find in my company's store was born from the battlefield and not from the boardroom. Let my life's work help you become your dog's hero. What model would be your I guess preferred carry gun?
Before I came to the US, all I could go off was what we had in the military, and so when I was in, we used to have the SIG 226, and then obviously the Glocks came in. I got injured out in 2011, and I remember going to the SHOT Show in Vegas. 511, who were my sponsors, took me there, and I'd never heard of Staccato, never heard of Leopold. And, we don't have the same budget as the American Special Forces, like SEAL Team 6 and Delta. They could probably pick and choose what they want. We're literally given, that's your C8 DeMarco, that's your SIG, use it and these your optics. So for me, it was first exposure of how big the gun and ammunition industry was. And it was amazing. And a good friend of mine, Eric from 511, literally took me around for 2 days and was explaining about the different weapon systems and who were the best within the industry. And, he said, like, Staccato, they are the Ferrari of the pistol world. And I was like, okay. And then Leopold, their strap line was Be Relentless. My book's called Relentless, so it was such a natural fit. And then I loved the history of the brands. So for me, you could obviously throw the net out and go with anyone, but I like to align with brands that are like top of their field.
Yeah. Is there a model of Staccato that you like the best?
I do like the XC and the P, but now that the Staccato CS is out, it would be better for a concealed carry, and I know they've just launched the Staccato C. So straight from here, I'm heading down to the Staccato Ranch for 2 days, and I'll try out the C. But I do like the XC and the P. They're a bit bigger. I like to feel like I've got a weapon in my hand.
Yeah. I've actually never shot one. I mean, I'm familiar with the brand, but that makes me curious.
We'll get you down there
to check those out. Yeah, that's awesome. In terms of morning routine, do you have I get up at this hour and first 3 hours I do X, Y, and Z?
So we have 3 children. I have a 13-year-old daughter, 8-year-old son, and a 2-year-old daughter. And so if it's a school day, it's getting them out the door. So I'll get up before the rest of the family. I'll make the breakfast for the kids and get them out the door. My wife and I work together. We're both self-employed. And so our office is actually in our home at the moment. And the reason for that was with our first 2 children, we were so busy with work, we sort of missed them growing up. So we're fortunate we have a nanny now who comes in, but she looks after our daughter at home, and then we're working out of the garage. Yeah. But with our line of work, every day's a different day, especially in the lights of security and crisis management around the world. One phone call could change the course of the next 2 months. So really just getting the kids ready, out to school, and then just sort of attacking that things to do list, which never ends.
Yeah. So you get right into it. You don't have I take the first certain period of time for me, and I do this like self-care routine or anything like that.
More recently, I've started to get into meditation, trying to find that self-care, because you can just be busy and burn out. But actually, my wife is like myself. She loves to be busy. We don't like sitting around. Hence why we never have time to celebrate our successes. My real getaway is probably training. I try to allocate some time each day to train, and just to stick the headphones in and just drift away. And actually, a lot of my good ideas come from sitting on the bike or working out in the gym. But I'll try to. My wife understands. We'll talk about it later with the bike ride. I was trying to promote that physical activity helps your mental state. So she knows when I'm grumpy, to get myself. Most men in a house will have a man cave. I have a pain cave. And so I'll just go into the pain cave and work out.
What music is in the headphones when you're getting after?
I have everything from ABBA to ZZ Top.
It
depends.
ABBA, huh?
It depends what mood I'm in. When I was doing the bike ride, it was just really what mood I was in. I love everything from like AC/DC to dance music.
How can you not like AC/DC and ZZ Top are classics? Some of my favorites too. All right, so where are you originally from? Obviously England, but where in?
So I was born in Swindon. Swindon's about an hour west of London. But my father was in the military, and so he was actually away at the time, and my mother got flown to RAF Rawton just outside Swindon to give birth to me. But I never really spent any time there. And then every 3 years we would move around with my father at different postings, Germany and then back to UK, different locations.
Yeah. And did you have siblings?
Yeah, I have 2 sisters. Yeah, I'm the eldest of 3.
As far as moving around every couple of years, at the time, did you kind of despise that of not being settled in and losing friends, or did you look at it kind of fondly?
Yeah, at the time I didn't really know anything else to reference it to. But at the age of 8, my mother and father split up, and I remember the morning, it was New Year's Day, 1985, and my mother sort of grabbed me and my 2 sisters, gave us breakfast, and I could see there was like blood on the fireplace, and she literally got us on a train and sent us up to Manchester, where she was from originally. And when we were there, she then told us that, I've left your dad, we're going to live here in Manchester. And so for me, I was quite close to my father. We ended up, because we had no home, we ended up in a homeless shelter in Moss Side in Manchester. Moss Side is probably, for the Americans, is the most dangerous ghetto in the whole of UK at the time in the 1980s. Me and my sisters were the only Caucasian kids in the school. So at a young age, at the age of 8, I was already fighting in the playground. But my father, he put his career on hold. He was a military man. He was a sergeant major at the time in the Royal Engineers, and he was promoted to an RSM and was getting posted to Germany. And he put his career on pause, and every 2 weeks would drive 240 miles, pick me and my sisters up, take us back down south, have a weekend with him. So that was sort of my respite from where I was growing up in Manchester. About 2 years later, just shy of 2 years later, he was going through a custody case. It was going through the courts. And the judge at the time said, I'm not going to split the siblings up. They make the decision who they live with. And obviously I was close to my father. And at the age of 10, I had to make the decision that I'd live with my father. And that decision was for me and my sisters, which was quite difficult. Yeah. And so he got custody of me and my sisters and moved us back down to Aldershot. And Aldershot was the home of the British Army. So the airborne were all there. Where my school was, they had the balloon where the parachutists jump out. The Red Devils free fall team used to take off from our school playing field. So I was immersed in that military environment. And then my father's career came to an end. And then we moved out probably about 40 minutes away into a little village in the country. When I say a village, there's only about 400 houses in this village. And I was about 12 at that point. And that's when I had my first sort of stability in life. I then went to what you guys would have high school. I went to high school, and we didn't move from then on. So that's when I formed some strong friendships there. But up until then, I didn't really know that, moving around. I didn't have social media. So, once you left, you lost complete comms.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, that's quite the whirlwind. If we can take a step back, you mentioned there was blood in the fireplace. What happened with that?
So my mother and my father used to fight quite regularly, like domestic violence. You'd probably assume it was more the father on the mother. My mum's a scrapper, so I think it was two ways. So I didn't know whose blood it was. But yeah, I think obviously, as a child, you hear the arguing and the fight, and it just got to a certain point that she obviously was brave enough to then leave.
Yeah. When you came to that shit or get off the pot moment of having to pick who to live with, obviously you were closer with your dad and you picked that, but how did that impact your mom?
Yeah, I still remember now my mum having to drop me off a friend's house because she wasn't there when my father took us away. But I remember her being dragged away by her friends because she was hysterical. I still keep in touch with my mother, and one of my sisters was very close to my mum, and it's like, well, if we live with mum, it would be like this. You're 10 years old, you don't know what's going to happen in the future. For me, I think it was the right decision for myself and for my sisters. We had stability. Yeah. My mother then went on and had a successful career as a prison officer, for 20 plus years. Yeah. And so, she said, well, if you stay with me, I still would have had a successful career. You just don't know what would have happened. But for me, I have no regrets of that decision.
Does she hold that against you?
She doesn't hold it against me. No, she doesn't hold that against me. I have to admit, I probably speak to my mum probably about once a year.
Oh, wow.
I joined the army at 17 though.
Yeah.
And so that was me then off on my own sort of career path. But no, she doesn't hold it against me.
I mean, is that something that to this day that your sisters give you shit about or that it comes up at all? Or?
Not my youngest. The elder one, she's about a year younger than me. Now and then she may bring it up, normally at family weddings and funerals when they've had a few drinks. I'm like, okay, don't look back, just keep looking forward.
Yeah. Isn't that an Oasis song or something? Don't look back in anger or some shit.
Don't look back in anger. Yeah. That's it.
Oasis is pretty big time there, huh?
Yeah, still? They were. Yeah, back in I joined the army in 1995. Yeah. And my first posting was Germany. Yeah, so 95, 96. Yeah. So it was either Oasis or Blur. That was the competition. Yeah. And another band. Yeah.
That's funny. All right. So did you play any sports growing up?
I love playing sports. I wouldn't say I was particularly good at a specific sport, but I just liked competing. My father was actually, my father was like the Ted Lasso of the army. Shit. He was the soccer manager, player, and coach.
Really?
Yeah. So, but now I've watched Ted Lasso, I know he's nothing like my father. So, in the family, so my father, as a reference point, he was what we call a tracksuit soldier. He was a semi-professional sports player. So, yes, he'd wear his uniform now and then, but majority of the time I saw him, he was in a tracksuit. He was on the soccer pitch, running the guys around. And so he was very competitive, and I think I got my competitive drive from him. Even on like Christmas Day when you get board games, it was like, you need to win that because you've got another year to wait until whether you can take the crown. So I'd say, there wasn't a sport I was specifically good at. But yeah, I had that competitive drive from my father.
Yeah. Is he still with us?
No, unfortunately, my father passed away back in 2014.
Oh, wow.
We have bowel cancer. So yeah,
I'm sorry to hear that.
That's right.
All right, so you join at 17. Go straight in. Walk us through kind of the first couple of early years, and what it was like, specifically from a kind of a realistic or a expectation versus reality standpoint. Yeah,
like I said, I was immersed in that environment, but I actually never wanted to join the military at first. Really? It wasn't an ambition of mine. I always wanted to be a fireman growing up. And so unlike the US, so our schooling, you finish at 16 and a half, and then you go to college for 2 years, and then you go to university. So that's how it works. So my father was quite strict that I was never allowed to really go play sport outside my powers until I'd done my homework. He was very much like, you want to be academically, quite smart. So once I finished school, I then went to college and did my A-levels. But growing up with my father, he used to take us on holiday down to Newquay, which is the southwest of UK, and used to surf. So I've been surfing since I was a young boy. And Americans don't realize, but actually UK is part of the World Surf League Tour.
Yeah,
they go to Newquay. And so when I went to college with a few of my pals, we went to Newquay for a couple of weeks on a holiday, and I ended up staying down there, working as a silver service waiter in a hotel. Long before the mobile phone, my father came back 2 weeks later to pick me and my pals up, and I wasn't there. So 6 months later, he came back down looking for me, and I was working in a surf shop. And he's like, well, you've ruined your education. What are you going to do now? So the 4-hour journey back home, I said to him, well, I'll join the military. So for me, my reasons for that was back in 1994, there was for one job in the fire brigade, there was 2,000 applications because it was in the middle of the recession.
Oh, wow.
So I knew at the age of 17 and a half, you got to be 18 anyway. I wasn't going to get that job. I needed a bit of experience. So my mindset was, well, I'll join the army for 3 or 5 years, get what I can, have a great resume, and then transfer to the fire brigade. So I was telling my father this, and my dad said, "You last 2 minutes." That was his response. And I was about 5'7", weighed about 130 pounds, soaking wet through, so I could see where he was coming from. So for me, it was like, well, there's no point in arguing with him. The best course of action, I say, is action itself. And so the Monday morning, I walked into the careers office in Aldershot, and the recruiter was from the parachute regiment. And so, he's obviously like, well, all right, son, why don't you come join the parachute regiment? So I came out. My father's office, he was now a civil servant. He was probably only about 400 meters away from this careers office. I went straight over to his office. I said, I'm joining the parachute regiment. He said, you're bloody not. And he marched me straight back in. But like I said, my father, because he was a tracksuit soldier, I wasn't aware of all the units and what roles they played. I'd never even heard of the Special Boat Service, especially in Aldershot. You're not going to get a Navy, Special Forces or Royal Marine recruiter. So my father was in the Royal Engineers, and he said that you can actually join the Royal Engineers and then go do P Company or the Commando course and then be attached. And he said, 5'9" Commando have reconnaissance troop, which means you get your Commando dagger and your airborne wings. And so I went back in, said I want to join the Royal Engineers. I had to do this touchscreen test, and there's finished the test, and they said you can choose any trade you want. So in the Royal Engineers, you can either be a bricklayer, a plumber, you can be a draftsman, you can be a fitter HVAC. There's all these trades. And so for me, back in this is like December now, 1994, I think it was, and I was like, bomb disposal, that sounds sexy, because I was thinking of my penis. I thought, I wonder what the girls will find attractive. Long before Afghan and Iraq. Yeah. So I came back out and I said to my father, I'm joining EOD. He said, you're bloody not. And he marched me straight back in. So he had an influence on those early days in the engineers. And so, like I said, I February 95, I joined. We did our 10-week basic training. Finished that, and then we did combat engineer training. And in a short period of time, I was growing physically, but mentally I was getting stronger as well. I was like, actually, I'm competing with my peers here, if not, coming top. And so in a short period of time, by the age of 21, I'd done my Commando course, I'd done my airborne course, I was a PTI in the gym, I was a diver. I'd done all the arduous courses you could in the Royal Engineers. To start off, though, because of my father's reputation being a soccer player, my first posting was Germany, because they're like, you're Dave Stott's son. And so I ended up playing soccer in Germany for the first year, which was good. That's when I ended up working in the gym. But every morning we would play on the AstroTurf from 8 o'clock until noon. Oh, wow. And then every Wednesday was a big game. So I soon realized that actually looking internally, I was actually following my father's career, and I was like, I don't want to do that. So I then volunteered for the All Arms Commando course. Yeah.
As you guys know, sleep is a huge component to recovery and really all aspects in life, and it's something that a lot of us have struggled with, for a lot of our lives, frankly. As you know, I've been a big proponent of Beam, which is a hot cocoa that you drink before you go to sleep, and it's helped tremendously in terms of hours of sleep maintained as well as the quality of sleep. Today, my listeners get a special discount on Beam's Dream Powder, which is their science-backed hot cocoa for sleep, and it's got no added sugar. Better sleep has never tasted better. As you know, other sleep aids can cause next-day grogginess and just make you feel crappy, but Dream contains a powerful all-natural blend of reishi, magnesium, L-theanine, and apigenin, also melatonin, to help you fall asleep, stay asleep, and wake up feeling refreshed. If you want to try Beam's best-selling Dream Powder, get up to 40% off for a limited time when you go to shopbeam.com/micdrop, all caps, all one word, and use code MicDrop, all one word, all caps, at checkout. That's shopbeam.com/micdrop and use code MicDrop for up to 40% off. Warning, this product contains nicotine. Nicotine is an addictive chemical. Black Buffalo products are intended for adults aged 21 and older who are consumers of nicotine or tobacco. It's your good buddy Mike Ritland here with the Mic Drop Podcast. If you are an adult aged 21 and older and use nicotine or tobacco, I want to tell you about an American-made success story and Black Buffalo's award-winning nicotine pouches. Black Buffalo's nicotine pouches are not owned by Big Tobacco. They're an independent company proudly built right here in the USA for 21 and over adult consumers. Black Buffalo was built by dippers with decades of smokeless tobacco use. They believed the market wanted a tobacco alternative nicotine product that offered the best of both worlds: bold flavor, full pouches. What are they made of? It's pretty simple: cured edible green leaves, food-grade ingredients, and pharmaceutical-grade nicotine. Most importantly, there's no tobacco leaf or stem. Black Buffalo is all about the history and tradition of dip, but they understand the convenience and discretion modern-day consumers are looking for. Black Buffalo's nicotine pouches give you the versatility to consume discreetly, but still keep the ritual with flavors dippers love: mint, straight, and wintergreen, all proudly made right here in the USA. So, if you're 21 and older, consume nicotine or tobacco, and want to join the Black Buffalo herd, head over to blackbuffalo.com to learn more. You can order nicotine pouches online, and they ship directly to most states. Or check out their store locator to purchase pouches at thousands of retail locations around the country. Black Buffalo Tobacco Alternative, bold flavor, full pouches. But with the soccer, I mean, is the Army soccer team, is that what you were playing on?
Yeah, so what you had the British Army in UK, and then you have what was called the British Army over the Rhine, which was based in Germany. So my dad's team were the champions in UK, and the unit I was with were the champions in Germany. So they would have their own competitions, and then they'd come together. Yeah. So I was playing for the Royal Engineers. Yeah, I mean, a lot of the guys went off to the Army team.
And I mean, I assume you were pretty good at it to be on the team.
Yeah, I'd probably say there's a balance of good and being very fit. You know, my manager, he's Scouse, he used to put me out, and he knew that because I was fast, that I'd tire out their midfield and defense. So it was more of a strategic play. But I wasn't the best team. There was some guys there who were exceptional. So that's when I sort of looked at myself. I was like, you can either play sport the rest of your career. I joined actually with a guy called Frank Green, who we joined the Army together. And 22 years later, he's at the end of his career, and all he's played is rugby. Which is great. He gets to go on tours around the world. So, I mean, there's some guys that see that as a platform. A lot of them went professional. Some guys get bought out of the Army and then actually go play professional soccer, rugby, or boxing as well. So, for me, I knew I was good, but I knew I wasn't exceptional. That would happen to me.
Yeah. Would you consider yourself a big soccer fan? Like, do you follow it?
I follow it. I just like the big games. It's quite a big thing in the UK. Yeah. Interestingly enough, growing up in Manchester, my mother's side of the family, her cousin played for Manchester United. My mum's side are like huge Man United fans. But then when my father and I moved back down south in Surrey, Chelsea, in London is our team. So I actually go back. I've done some guest speaking at Manchester United Foundation for the kids, because a lot of the kids that they come from these impoverished areas are from Moss Side and Fallowfield, where I grew up. Yeah. And then the first question I get from them, who's your team? I'm at Chelsea.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I do like the structure that professional soccer, like the way that it's organized, and you kind of have to earn your keep all the time. Yeah. And the moving of categories or whatever, I guess, what are they called? Categories?
Yeah, there's leagues. Yeah. You get promoted or,
Yeah, like I think that, it's almost like capitalism in sports to a certain extent, and it keeps everybody hungry, because, football here being, really the biggest sport, I think, in the country, I assume. I guess I don't know that for a fact, but you get teams that suck forever, and it's not that there's not motivation to do well, but I just like that you can be on a chopping block and get bumped down to kind of almost the minor leagues. I mean, between the top championship league and the very bottom, that's a big difference, right?
Yeah, that's a good thing about the UK soccer as well. They have a thing called the FA Cup, the Football Association Cup, which is their biggest cup. It's like their Super Bowl.
Yeah.
But right at the beginning of the tournament, you can have a non-league team playing against a Premier League team, and it's a knockout competition. But actually, talking about it, the Royal Engineers, who I played for in Germany, they were the first ever winners of the FA Cup back in God knows wherever. And so we used to joke that I used to play soccer for an FA Cup winning team, which wasn't actually a lie.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, that's the great thing about the FA Cup is that gives these younger teams sort of that hope.
Do any of them ever knock the big teams off?
Yeah, sometimes they do. Yeah, sometimes they do. Yeah, and for them, it's like it's their dream game. And cool. Even financially wise, even if that TV show that match is being aired, that team gets money.
Yeah,
and that's probably like 5 times their annual budget. Yeah. But that's the other thing. The Premier League now is so big in the UK. I think if you get promoted, the team automatically gets $100 million, £100 million to go through. So and they lose a lot as well going down. So that's their sort of motivations.
Yeah, it seems like between Ted Lasso and I'm trying to think of the name of the show that the Always Sunny in Philadelphia, Rob McElhenney and Ryan Reynolds bought a team.
Oh, Wrexham?
Yeah, Wrexham.
Yeah.
Like between those two shows and just soccer picking up steam over the last 15, 20 years here in the United States, it's become a lot bigger. I mean, I wouldn't call myself a fan, but I do like to watch it like during the World Cup and pay attention there. It's just kind of a neat energy, but. I mean, that's a huge fucking thing in England, right? I mean,
it's huge in England, but it's also huge around the world. Yeah. I've actually used soccer sometimes to my advantage when I'm operating in the likes of Africa, and South America. It's almost like a conversation starter, especially in Africa, because they're all wearing different. So for me, if there's a situation, it looked like it could be quite tense.
Yeah,
I can just break the ice and just talk soccer, and then everyone just understands.
We played soccer similarly, like it's big everywhere we go, and none of us really played. So like we would play. I remember in the Philippines, we were there for like 2 months, and they were all playing soccer, and finally we played them, and playing by the rules, they were just destroying us, and so we just started tackling them all the time. Like we just turned it into a football game and just started beating the shit out of them. It was priceless. But
I'm actually playing again. A friend of mine introduced me a team back in Orange County called FC UK.
Oh, nice.
And they're in the Premier League. So I'm now officially the oldest player in the Premier League, in the SWPL. But what it is there's young guys there, 19, 18, 19, 20, and I'm not playing because of my skills, but it's more of a mentorship program. Some of these are like, they don't have fathers in their lives, but previous players for the team have gone on to play for LA Galaxy in Miami. So it's almost like a stepping stone before they go professional. Cool. So there's a mixture of some of the old boys and then this young talent. But I sometimes come off the pitch wondering what I'm doing. I'm 47 years old, trying to run around and chase these 20-year-olds. So but you're a bit wiser. You know what I mean? That's what it is.
I feel the same way on the jiu-jitsu mats for sure, like running into 25-year-olds that, it's a humbling experience for sure. Going back to the military is within the kind of the culture of the UK, having lived in America now long enough to get a pretty good sense of how veterans and service members are regarded, treated, et cetera, in the United States. Is it similar there where it's a pretty noble thing and it's looked highly upon?
It's getting better. I joined in 1995, so in 1995 we still had the threat of the IRA, the Irish Republican Army, so you can never wear uniforms out in public. In Germany we used to have, because of the threat as well for terrorism for us, our license plates weren't on the DMV or the DVLA back home. But I remember going into, when I joined the army, you weren't allowed tattoos below your sleeves. If you rolled your sleeves up, you weren't allowed tattoos down there. Nightclubs, they wouldn't let people in with short hair. You're very much almost penalized for being in the military.
Wow.
But then obviously as tattoos then became like, popular and things like that. And then with the start of, obviously 9/11 changed a lot of things as well. Definitely for America, but even for us in the UK as well. Yeah. And so I remember growing up, joining the army, I wouldn't have, other than the Royal British Legion, which is the oldest veteran charity, I couldn't name another one. Now there's like 2,000, military charities. So yeah, I've seen the evolution change. But when I joined, we weren't allowed in nightclubs more than groups of 2.
Wow.
So we were penalized.
Yeah. That's wild. As far as the, I guess, sticking to the cultural thing, and going back to your childhood just a little bit, were there any childhood traditions that are very specific to England that you really enjoyed and looked fondly upon that are non-existent here? Childhood
traditions. Again, it's a different era. It's before the digital era, Yeah. So now I'm sort of comparing my kids, and they're always like, it's the digital platform. Any traditions? No. I think if we're very. What I love here in America is the fact that you make stuff, camping, going down to the lake with the boat, the jet ski. You make that easy and accessible. In UK, we don't have that.
Really?
That luxury. Yeah, it's quite difficult. Yeah, you have to travel quite a way to find somewhere that's able to camp and able to do that. So that's what I like here, But as a young child growing up, we used to enjoy camping, but there's only certain areas that you can go. Whereas that's what I love about America is that you can just hook up, and go wherever,
under a bridge, wherever you want.
Wherever you want. Yeah, yeah.
All right. So going back to the military career. You decide to go through the Commando course. I would love to get kind of the soup to nuts experience from your eyeballs of what it was like going through that. Yeah,
so the All Arms Commando course, you have the Royal Marines. Their course is 9 months long, but they're coming in from a civilian and then finishing 9 months later. The All Arms Commando course is a 10-week commando course, and you have everyone from young guys that are privates, sappers or gunners, all the way up to officers from the Navy. So if you're going to work with Free Commander Brigade, either in the Royal Engineers, the Royal Artillery, a naval dental, naval doctor, you have to do the commando course. And basically it's the 9-month Marine course condensed into 10 weeks. But you're already trained soldiers. You've already gone through your own basic training. And so basically they're teaching you the TTPs and the SOPs of the commandos, which is very different from the Green Army. And then in between you're doing the commando tests. And there's various commando tests. The final one is a 30-miler in 8 hours, which the instructors lead. But I remember doing my course, and I was just coming, about 19 years old I was. And I remember it was heavy weights, but slow pace. But at 19, again, your body's developing. I remember really struggling with that weight. But you had senior NCOs, you had officers there who sort of were helping the young guys along as well. And we also, on the commando course, we had foreign students. We had a guy called Gunny Padilla from the US Marine Corps. Yeah. He came and he was a nightmare because when the instructors had gone home, he was getting us up at 5 in the morning to clean the billet. I'm like, hang on, there's no instructors here. But then we had Lebanese officers, we had a couple of Ukrainians as well. So they would all come do this course. But I was fortunate to go back down. I didn't learn much on my commando course. Going into it, the instructors come from the Royal Marines, and they have a Royal Engineer and a Royal Artillery instructor as well, representing the Army. And they were quite strict. They wouldn't let us wear waterproofs. It was literally, how fit are you and how long you can sustain anything in the cold. I didn't really learn much on my commando course. And actually, every one of those instructors, bar the Army instructors, got sacked after that because we were so officer heavy. Yeah. When they did the final reports, these officers just went to town. Yeah. And they're like, "What's going on this commando course?" And they got rid of them. I went back down as an instructor at 24 years old, and it was night and day. But I also remember thinking how light the Bergen was. Things had changed from a 19-year-old. Pushing yourself through those extremes, but going down. But again, you're on a different side of the line. When you're a student and when you're an instructor, it's two different things. But I remember thinking, are we going to be instructing like my instructors were? It wasn't. It was night and day. The students learned so much from it. So that was good to see. But you have to. The great thing about the Commando course is it's the only coveted beret in the UK military. So you have to earn it. You can't go to Free Commander Brigade unless you've done the Commando course.
Oh, okay.
So like if you were attached to an airborne unit or even attached to the SAS with the Sandy Beret, you get their colour beret to be part of that unit. But the Green Beret is the only coveted one. So when you see someone with the Green Beret, you know that they've done the Commando course and earned the right to wear that beret.
How would you compare that to SAS selection in terms of difficulty and?
Yeah, so the Commando course, same with the airborne course, is like a tier 2 selection process. It's probably like your buds and some of the other courses here. It's very much about working as a team, and the instructors shout at you a lot, and some people like that. Some people like that as a motivation. The SAS and SBS selection is totally different from that. You turn up, you have to be self-motivated. The instructors don't even shout at you because the selection's that hard anyway that they don't need to. So I always say that majority of the guys that go on SAS and SBS selection come from the Commando or the airborne fraternity anyway, and so they've already proved themselves and been able to operate as in a team. And so now what they're looking for is that individualism. Yeah,
I got you. And I know, our CAG Delta selection is based off of that, and it sounds like it's, not carbon copied, but very similar.
Yeah, I think it was Colonel Beckwith.
Yeah.
Colonel Beckwith spent 2 years with the SAS, and then he came back. In 1977, set up the Delta Force sort of model from the UK one. And I've just done a show which we'll talk about where we go around the world visiting the Special Forces, and it was really interesting for me to see that the origins of these Special Forces tend to come from the UK or even the US. But UK being more because they're a bit older, almost a template for a lot of the Special Forces around the world.
Yeah. All right, so after the Commando course, what did you do between finishing that and then coming back as an instructor?
Yeah, so I did my Commando course in '97. We went straight to Norway. So we're Free Commander Brigade in the Royal Marines. Post Second World War, we do Arctic training every January, February, March. And the reason for that was it was still the Cold War era. Should Russia start moving west, that the commandos would hold that front with the Norwegians and the Swedish. And so when I went out there, I did my basic, my Arctic survival course. And within my unit and within Free Commander Brigade, there's another subunit called Brigade Reconnaissance Force. And, from 5.9, the engineers, we have 5.9 Recce, which is part of that. You have 148 naval gunfire from the artillery, and then you have a unit called Brigade Patrol Troop from the Royal Marines, which consists of snipers and mountain leaders. And in Norway, the Recce Troop were looking for potential candidates to go to Recce Troop, and so I got spotted quite early on, and then moved over to Recce Troop. My career in the Free Commando Brigade was quite unique. So did 3 years with Recce Troop, and the Recce Troop used to send an instructor down on the Commando course. So although you're still part of the unit, it was actually classed as a posting. It was actually classed as you leaving. So I went down, spent a year there, and then went back to Recce Troop for another 4 years. So I actually went from a sapper to a sergeant in one unit, in one place. So I did 8 years as in Free Commander Brigade, and majority of the time with Brigade Reconnaissance Force. That was when my sergeant major's like, you need to now leave, because for you to progress through your career, you need to have more experience in other units. And during that time, I did a lot of courses. In the Royal Engineers, we have divers as well. And so the diving course, everyone knows about the Commando course, and the airborne course has been quite hard. But I'd say the diving course was probably the hardest of them all. Yeah, it was difficult. So it was the only course really where you got additional pay. And so, some guys would go down for the extra money, and you'd weed them out. But it's a 6-week basic course, then it's a 10-week for the advanced course, and then if you then can do a supervisor's course. And so during my time when I was in 5/9 Commando, I'd gone down and done all those courses, and I was now an Army diving supervisor. I came top of my diving supervisor course, and there'd been a few deaths in the Navy diving fraternity, because the Navy divers were actually part-time divers. And so because of the deaths and health and safety, they introduced this new diving equipment called Sabre Mod 1. And so at that 8-year point when I had to leave 5/9, Glasgow in Scotland, that's the man in a records place. They pretty much tell you where you're going to get posted. I basically got told I was going down to the dive school as a senior diving instructor to train those already, the divers already are in the units on this new diving kit. So I went straight from there to there, and that's when I decided I was going to go on selection.
Yeah. I guess going all the way back to your time originally in Norway, the interaction that you had with those guys and the cross training, what was your take and perception on the caliber of guys that you were working with from Norway? Were they similar to your guys? Did you see a difference?
We didn't do any cross training really with the Norwegians. Yeah, not really, because it's an exercise pretty run by free Commando brigade, and so with the Norwegians, I remember being in Kosovo in '99 and then going into this Norwegian base, and they all started saluting us. I was like, don't salute us. But what I then realized is because a lot of them are conscripts, and so if they see you as regular military, they salute you. But it was only later on in my career I ended up working with some of the Norwegian SF, and them guys, when you talk about skiing, they grew up on ski. They were born on skis. I was very fortunate to go after I did my Arctic warfare training. I then went over to Norway and did my military ski instructors in Norway.
That's a shitty deal.
Oh yeah, it's probably the best course I've been on. But it's in a town called Rjukan. I don't know if you ever seen the movie Telemark Heroes?
I haven't.
With Kirk Douglas. Is it Kirk Douglas's dad? Yeah. No, it's Kirk Douglas. His son's Michael Douglas. Kirk Douglas, and it's a famous operation during the Second World War where there was a still water plant in Rjukan which they were going to build the atomic bomb, the Nazis. And these Norwegians got wind of it, and they basically skied. There's one guy who skied and evaded 30 Nazis on skis, and he handed a document over, skied all the way down to Oslo, handed over this secret document. We went to UK, and then they planned this raid which wiped out this still water plant. It's a great movie, but my ski instructors was actually in that town.
Oh shit!
Yeah, I mean, looking back now, the last survivor, the Telemark Heroes, came and gave us a presentation, and I didn't really realize, who I was actually listening to. But yeah, that was great for me, and that's when I got real exposure of some of these Norwegian guys. Yeah, because they were like, they come out the mother's womb with planks on their feet. You know what I mean?
Caliber of soldier, though. How would you stack them up against your guys?
In the Arctic environment, they're on par. It's a bit like this show we just done, Top 5 Forces on Earth. It's really hard to gauge because we went to Sweden, and those guys are great in the Arctic, but would they be good in the desert, or would they be good in the jungle? So for me, I could only compare us to them in the Arctic environment, and they were on par. But would they be on par in another environment? I don't know. We train in all environments.
Yeah. I guess I feel like when you're at that level, like just interacting with people, you get a sense of what kind of guy it is.
Yeah, true.
Did they seem like they were super stand-up dudes?
Yeah, they're super stand-up dudes. Yeah, and then we also had when on our ski instructors, we also had the Dutch, the Dutch Marines. And them guys are good. Yeah, them guys are all about 6'5", 6'6".
I know
Yeah.
it. I don't know what it is with. I don't know if it's the water or.
Well, no, actually, we used to get upset because I remember going into the bars and these Dutch guys, look like Dolph Lundgren and things like that, and they used to be chatting to the gills. But the reason is they never got involved in the Great Wars, and so their bloodlines weren't cut.
Really?
Yeah, and so that's what it is. So obviously the Brits, the Americans got involved, all the bloodlines were cut, and so they maintained that height. And I sort of joke it's because they were cowards.
I'm sure they love that.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, they love that one in the bar, didn't they?
That's great. You mentioned that the dive course you feel like is tougher than, or the toughest of all of them. What separates it? What makes it tougher?
So what separates that? The equipment's heavy anyway. Just moving dive site to dive site. But they used to use it as an excuse. But when you're decompressing, so what we do in the Royal Engineers as divers, anything that we can do on the surface, we do underwater. So whether it's chainsaws, breakers, concrete and demolitions, we do all that underwater. And naturally that equipment is heavy anyway. But when you're actually decompressing, so we can dive down to 50 meters and come up. But if you have fat in your body, it can trap bubbles. So they say obviously the more leaner you are, it's easier for decompressing. So the instructors used to use that as an excuse to absolutely just hammer you in. But we used to run around in dry suits and things like that. But what it really did is really eliminated those who were just there for the paycheck and those who actually wanted to be divers themselves. And there was an incident actually where 2 guys died. They boiled in their bag in their dry suits. Oh wow! Yeah, it's because they hadn't vented them off. So it's a hard course. In the fact that just the equipment, the physical, and then you're diving in the day, and then you come back and you have a meal, and then you got to do a night dive. It's quite an arduous course. I mean, obviously, from a safety standard as well, when you're a diving supervisor, there's no room for error as well. Yeah.
How long is that course?
So the basic dive course is 6 weeks.
Okay.
You then go back to your unit, and then you have to have accumulated so many diving hours before you can then go back on your advanced dive course, which is then another 10 weeks.
Oh, okay.
So your basic course is more scuba.
Yeah.
But then when you come back on your advanced course, it's scuba, then also surface supplies, so the big Kirby Morgan helmets, the big yellow helmets. And then you go away, and then if you want to then do your diving supervisors, a lot of guys, again, the pay goes up, but a lot of guys just don't want that responsibility. Yeah. So but for me, I was like, I'll do it.
Yeah, I was a dive soup, and I mean, there's a lot that can go wrong. Everything can go wrong.
Everything can go wrong.
Do you guys not use closed circuit?
We do in the special forces.
Okay.
Yeah, but not in the Royal Engineers. No. Yeah.
All right. So during that time from 19 to you were 25 when you decided to go to selection?
When I was 20. I was actually 27.
27.
Yeah.
From 19 to 27, did you do any overseas deployments during that time? And at 27, that's after 9/11.
Yeah, that was after 9/11. So we went. We did Kosovo, and actually Kosovo was good for us in '99. That was. So for 5/9 Recce Troop, the unit that I was with at the time, it was our first operational deployment since the Falklands War in 1982. There had been deployments to Northern Ireland, and so that was, there was a lot of eyes on us. That's a big period of time, 17 years. So we did that. I actually when I went on the Commando course as an instructor, I had to go back. As an instructor, my predecessor, the guy who took over from me, unfortunately his dad committed suicide. So he had to come off the training team. And so the natural fit was for me to then go back down there. And that's when 9/11 happened. And I was like, so I saw all my mates in Recce Troop going to Afghanistan. So I missed that initial one. But I then caught it up when I went to the SBS. But in Free Commando Brigade as well, we end up going on, you have to do jungle tours, Arctic tours, we're going around the world doing all those sort of training, but yeah.
Any good stories from any of those times that stand out as being super memorable and worth sharing?
In the Commandos or in the SBS ones?
The Commandos.
In the Commandos one.
Like any of the trips that you went on or any? Yeah,
they all have, they all have different, I remember one actually, it was in Kosovo, and we found out about someone who'd be basically making bombs and then targeting certain individuals, especially like more the politicians. And so what we were more of a peacekeeping unit at the time, and I remember we had to go pick this guy up, and I remember our team commander saying, right, we'll go grab the guy, put him in the vehicle, and just don't talk to him, because he was then we were then handing him over to another unit who was going to do all the interrogation stuff. And then when you as you know, when you do a SERE course, it's all about shock, shock and awe, don't communicate with a person. So we assaulted this building, we got the guy and we put him in the wagon, and he kept trying to lift his head. And so I just stuck my heel in the back of his head just to keep his head down. And he's like, fucking hell, that's bang out of order. And I was like, that's an accent from Manchester. So here's me thinking this guy is like, he's probably from Serbia or Macedonia, but he's actually from Manchester. So that really caught us out. And I remember then driving into this compound, and there's like, there's floodlights just on this one chair in the middle. And then it was like, we then handed him over. I was like, yeah. Did
you watch any of the turning of the screws?
No, none of the turning of the screws. We went back out. But and another good one we had in, there's a few actually in Kosovo, but I remember being on talking about it was our first ever operational tour for recce troops since the Falkland Islands, and the very first operation we went on the ground, and basically we're looking for pifwicks,
which is what
people wanted for war crimes, because there was a whole genocide stuff going on in the area at the time. So we needed to go in, do OPs, observation posts, and it also had to be. Couldn't be digital imagery because we had to think about these guys going to court. It had to be like wet film imagery as well. So we ended up literally getting all this photography kit off the shelf and going in. But I remember getting the brief from the ops officer, and the intel guy came in, did his brief, and then we deployed that evening. And like I said, it's your first operation tour. You want to be a success. And the team commander, my friend Callum, he ended up having diarrhea, so he's like man down. Then there's a 6-man team. We had jerry cans. We had so much kit, it was weighing us down. But I kept hearing this rustling sound in the leaves, and I'm like, it sounds like someone's creeping up at us. So we just stood to and we just observe, look around us. Anyway, this went on. We got to our OP. We did the same, and I just kept hearing this rustling. I'm like, oh my God, So for the 2 weeks that we're in the field, we literally hardly any of us had any sleep, because we're just literally on stand to and alert. Anyway, we pulled back out. We got what we needed, the imagery, and we went back and we had the debrief in the ops room, and then anything else. And I said, I can't confirm or deny whether we were compromised, because there was this rustling. And then the intel guy, this young intel guy, comes in. He goes, "Oh yeah, I did fail to mention that it's tortoise breeding season. So these tortoises had come out, and these horny tortoises were breeding. So we were obviously looking through our scopes and unaware that these little tortoises were wandering around." I said, "Well, that's quite important actually for the next team that go in." So
that would have been good to know.
Yeah, so that was a standout for me.
That's priceless. Yeah. You mentioned the accent on the guy that you had nabbed. You said you could tell he was from Manchester just by his accent?
Just by his accent. So UK, although we're quite small island and we're condensed, our accents are very broad.
Yeah.
Obviously, my mum's from Manchester. But even like Manchester and Liverpool is about 30 miles different. The accent is totally different.
That's wild.
Yeah, you can tell. You have Yorkshire, Geordies from Newcastle, Jocks, the Welsh, everyone has their own accents.
Could you ballpark how many different accents there are within England? And I mean, obviously it would be UK, but Irish is kind of Irish and Scottish is kind of Scottish, right?
You got the Irish. You have the Irish. You have Northern Ireland, Southern Ireland, but even in Scotland as well, there's dialects between. Like my father-in-law's from Govan in Glasgow, and it's like you can't even understand that. My wife's from Aberdeen. My father's from Montrose. It's very different. Even there, so it's not like Scotland. It's like we're in Scotland, So
that's interesting because I mean, as big as the United States is, there's not that many accents, really. I mean, there's a handful. I would say there's Southern, West Coast, Upper East Coast, which I guess Upper East Coast is probably closest to that way because New York is different from Boston, which is different from Jersey, and it's nuanced.
Yeah.
It all, I would say Boston sounds quite a bit different than New York and New Jersey, but New York and New Jersey is pretty similar, at least as not a New Yorker. But maybe if you're from New York, you can tell the difference between Long Island and Manhattan and whatever. You probably could, but for the rest of the United States, it's much more broad that way. There's not dozens of different kind of, you must be from this part of the Midwest or whatever. It's just
have a Google. I mean, maybe I don't know if there's a YouTube thing out there. Just listen to them. They're so varied as well.
Yeah, that's wild.
But that's what I liked about the military, because we had guys from all over the UK. So all these different accents.
So you can tell right away where they're from.
Oh, yeah. And there's a big divide between like the South and the North, you know, the Southerners and the Northerners, you know, they don't tend to get on. And
how do the Northerners and Southerners regard each other? Is it like...
I'd say Northern is more your working class.
Yeah.
In the Southern, you know, rugby, which is a big sport in the old days, was normally in the South.
Yeah.
Whereas rugby league is the Northerners.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's probably more of a class thing, but that's sort of changed over the years. So yeah, I know even my mum, you know, she's from the North and I'm from the South. You know, she calls me a Southern shandy drinking puff because I drink. You know, and we used to call them like Northern monkeys. You know what I mean? It just, it was more of a class thing back in the past, but that's sort of changed.
So where would your accent, if somebody didn't know you and they heard you talk, where would they think you're from?
Well, I think mine's quite unique because people can't pinpoint it to a specific accent. You know, once I've had a few drinks, I then start to sound like a Cockney from London. Yeah. You know, from one of these like gangster movies. But the fact that I say ma'am and not mum, people are like, well, that's a Northern saying, because Southerners would say their mum, and then Northerners would say their ma'am. Huh. So yeah, I really tend to confuse a few people.
Yeah, that's funny. That's fascinating stuff for sure. The language dialects is something I've always found really interesting. You mentioned the gangster movies and stuff. You watch Peaky Blinders? Have you seen that?
Yeah, I watched Peaky Blinders. Talking about accents, actually, probably the worst accent in UK is Birmingham, which is Brummies. Yeah. But Peaky Blinders has made Birmingham look quite sexy. Yeah.
What's your take on that series as a Brighton?
Yeah, I like it. Yeah, I thoroughly.
I fucking love that show.
I loved it. I do like it. But I was always surprised I was at Birmingham.
Yeah. I assume that unlike me, you don't need to turn the subtitles on to understand.
Yeah, I'm good to go. Yeah,
100% subtitles have to be on, or I only understand about half of it.
Yeah. Oh, no, some of them, like a great one. Have you seen Snatch with Brad Pitt? And accents with the Gypsies and the Irish. You know. Yeah. No, I'm quite good. I can pick up, and that was a good thing about the military, because you had people from all over the UK.
Yeah, that's
various
awesome.
accents.
Yeah. All right, so actually, before we get into the SAS selection, the one thing I wanted to ask is the turmoil between the IRA and England, and for a couple of decades. Obviously, it's not that way now, but is there still some spillover as far as the way that the kind of the British Army regards Irish people? Like, is there still a little bit of saltiness?
I think that sort of era's gone now. You know, I remember when I joined in 95, and there was a thing called the Corporal Killings. And I remember our instructors putting on TV, and it was like, you can see it in Wikipedia. It was two young signallers who wanted to come over from Germany. He was actually from Hereford, not Hereford, which is the SAS. There's a place in Germany called Hereford. And his counterpart was like, well, I'll show you around Northern Ireland, and they ended up driving the wrong way, went down into an IRA funeral. Oh, wow. Their vehicle got surrounded. The young lads panicked, and they pulled their pistol out and fired in the air. And then they just got mobbed by the guys. But it was all on TV. They ended up basically crucifying these guys, actually impaled them, took their eyes out, and stuff like that. And so that was my first exposure to the IRA when I was in the military. Yeah. But even now with the IRA, those from back in the day, they've all sort of passed on. It's almost like a younger generation who don't really understand why they were fighting. So that period's gone. But the big change for us, and listeners might not like this, the big change for us was 9/11. So the biggest funder to the IRA was the Americans, and people weren't aware of that. But as soon as 9/11 happened, when the Americans understood homeland terrorism, all funding got cut to the IRA from that point on.
Do you know the specificity of the American funding? Did it come from Irish?
Obviously, there's a huge Irish community in America, but I had a friend of mine who was dating a girl down in San Diego, and she was donating. And he's like, what are you donating for? And she goes, well, the hungry kids. So really, I don't think they understood what they were donating for.
Kind of like the Palestine.
Yeah, exactly. Where was the final money going to? Yeah. So actually post 9/11, it cut a lot of funding. Yeah. It's not to say the problem still isn't there, but it's not as bad as, we weren't, growing up, like I said, they used to target. I remember the Arndale Centre in Manchester. They used to target civilian shopping centres.
Yeah.
It wasn't just the military in the end.
Yeah.
And there's a few big incidents.
Yeah. Back, late 80s, early 90s, which, I remember hearing about car bombs and shit, as I was growing up, IRA conflict going on. But at that time, or even say when you joined, could somebody that's an Irish citizen join the British military, right?
Yeah. I was guys in the SBS I knew from Ireland. Yeah.
So,
depending on north or south. Yeah.
So, like in an instance like that, would British soldiers be skeptical of an Irishman joining the military during the height of that?
No, I think they obviously have, especially in the special forces, we have the defence vetting process, so you have to trust that process. But I didn't see it. No, I didn't see anyone being targeted or sort of singled out because they were Irish. Okay, not at all.
You mentioned 9/11 changing a lot of that. Where were you on 9/11? And if you could just kind of share your experience of when you heard about it, what was going on, and then the few days afterwards of how it impacted the British military. Yeah,
so I was in Recce Troop at the time, and actually we were about to go out to Oman on a training exercise. And I remember the guys all getting ready. I mean, my old troop boss was now working at the Defence Diving School. And it was on a Monday. I'd just flown back from Cyprus. We played soccer for 2 weeks in Cyprus. Wow. We had a football tournament over there. And I literally got back in on the Sunday. We were there on Monday getting all the kit prep to go to Oman the following week. And my old boss was at the dive school, and there was an advanced diving course that started. And you have to have a physical entrance test. But one of the guys had failed. And so he rang me and said, Dean, there's a slot. Can you get to the dive school tomorrow morning? So I spoke to my boss. He said, yeah, go. So I'm now packing for this dive course, and one of the guys comes in, Paddy Beattie, and he said, have you seen what's going on in the auditorium? I was like, no. So we all went over to the auditorium, and the first plane had already hit, and then we watched live as the second plane hit. And I remember seeing it, and I was like, what's going? It was hard for everyone to sort of absorb, and no doubt everyone was shocked. And so I had to then go on this dive course. So I'm driving that evening down to Portsmouth, listening to the radio as it's all starting, all unfold, and I'm like, oh, the guys are not going to go Oman now. They're going to go to Afghanistan. Thinking you're going to miss out on this, this great war, which ended up being like 20 years. Yeah. And so for me, I was, sort of like, I'm going on this dive course. So I went on the dive course, and then we soon realised that this isn't going to play out in a short period. Yeah, super fast. And so I was put at ease. I thought, oh my God, I'm going to end up missing out on this. And then finished my advanced dive course. Then went back on the training team down at Livingston. Yeah. Then soon realised, I know it's one of them ones. Be careful what you wish for. I remember saying, I want to go out, and they're like, there's going to be rotations. Don't worry. But yeah, as you know, here in America, and it was the same in UK, it changed the way that the military and the special forces operated. I think a good friend of mine, he worked in the White House on 9/11, and he was responsible for closing it all down. And I remember him saying to me, the first phone call that George Bush got was from Tony Blair, and he said, "Just let us know where you want us." Yeah. So that was awesome. That really solidified that allied unit between the UK and US.
Yeah. Did you get a sense in the society that there was a heaviness that was kind of unspoken? Obviously you weren't here when it happened. Here it was very much that way. There was just this weird, hard to describe kind of feeling, like everybody just looked at each other different. Yeah. It was like there was this somber seriousness that was just like, holy shit, what just happened? That everybody knew, everybody could feel, that nobody was really talking about, that it was just different. Did you get a sense of that?
We got the sense of that. I know it was here in the US, but it had a ripple effect around the world. Yeah. I don't mean, the only one we could really compare it to, probably not the same as Princess Diana dying in 97. That ripple effect, how that shocked everyone. It was very similar to that, definitely.
Yeah. I keep saying, we're going to get into the selection, but you keep coming up. I do find I haven't had many many guests that have this experience. So I'm just fascinated by other cultures, and I love to ask certain questions about that kind of stuff. And since you mentioned the royal family, within the military, is the royal family in high regard, or is it kind of like, these fucking guys, or like what?
No, they're in high regard, and they're actually tied to the military as well. So our commander-in-chief, when I joined, was the Queen.
Yeah.
It's now the King. So when we join the military, you sign the oath of allegiance that you will, for me, I will protect the Queen and all of her family beneath.
Yeah.
Whereas I think the Americans is your flag.
Yeah, well, the Constitution.
The Constitution. Ours is the royal family.
Yeah.
And so each unit as well will have a command. You have the commander-in-chief anyway, which is the Queen, but then you'll have, for example, like King Charles or Prince William or Princess Anne will be, the commander-in-chief for certain units as well.
Yeah.
All the colors, we have a big history going back, and so even the colors of the uniforms or the belts is related to the royal family. Our cap badges, when I joined, it was, with the Royal Engineers, it had ER in the middle, which was Elizabeth Regina, and then the two lines, which was Elizabeth II.
Yeah.
It's now like CR. So there's a big crossover, and we have the Irish Guards, the Scots Guards, the Welsh Guards, the Dragoon Guards, who also deploy, but then they also protect all the royal buildings.
Yeah. I guess from there's the government, right, and the Prime Minister.
Yeah.
But then there's the royal family. Does the royal family, are they considered part of a party politically?
They have to be neutral.
But are they, though? I mean...
No, they're not. So I don't know if you've ever watched it. It's called The Crown on Netflix. But it's a great one to watch. And, a friend of mine who's part of the royal family, he said it's 75% accurate, actually. But every week, the Prime Minister comes to the, I say the Queen, it's now the King. Comes to the King and actually talks about everything. And whether that's a Prime Minister from the Conservatives, from the Labour, the Liberal Democrats, it doesn't matter. So they have a say. The good example really of where the Queen came into her own in so many times and places, but COVID was a big one. No one was listening to the government. No one and then all of a sudden she did a speech and the whole nation stood still and listened to her.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So because they are impartial. They're not aligned to a certain party. It's for the people. Yeah. Not for, their own sort of gains.
Do you get that sense that King Charles is that way also? Or do you at least, because like here, obviously it's very on the nose, like everybody knows whose team that anybody is on or whatever, but like, is there a slant? Like, do you find that it seems like people members of the royal family are slanted one direction or another, or is it legitimately very neutral?
Not politically. I think they have their own causes that they support. I know like Charles and William, and then Harry, Harry was very much the veterans, like William and Charles is very much about conservation and wildlife, and they're quite vocal in that. But no, politically wise, they won't let you know which way. But a lot of people from the UK either love or hate the royal family. You get your royalists and you get those that don't like them. But regardless, I was chatting to someone the other day. They bring like $30 billion £30 billion of tourism into the UK.
Yeah.
They are they're a global brand.
Yeah.
Really, they've outlasted all the other monarchs that got wiped out as well. So for us, it's difficult unless you're from the UK. Explaining to Americans, it's like, what you oath of allegiance to one person? I was like, one person, and then the family around them. Yeah.
From a governmental and like policy influence standpoint, how big of a role does the royal family play in British society?
They'll have an input as well. Everything has to. Most things have to go through them. But again, what I like about them is they're a neutral set of eyes. Like here, you only have the two parties. You're either one or the other. At least we have a few more parties as well, but they don't see that. They'll see what is the best for the people. And we have a lot of history as well. They can obviously go back in history and say, well, actually, we tried this back then and it didn't work.
Yeah. Does it seem like they side with one party more than the rest? Not really?
No, very neutral. And they don't even show their cards on it either.
I gotcha. when push comes to shove policy-wise, do they have the authority to veto something or to say, like, no, that's not happening, we're doing this instead?
Yeah, they have a voice to intervene. Yeah, a lot of stuff tends to go through them. Hence why the Prime Minister weekly will go to the King now, and they'll discuss stuff.
So, from you looking at the government and or an average British citizen looking at the government, would they look at that and kind of view the Prime Minister more as a figurehead place ornament that doesn't really have that much power then if the royal family can kind of trump?
Yeah, no, I think the Prime Minister government still has a lot of power. It's just more of a tradition, courtesy thing. And, if you get to watch The Crown, you'll see some of the conversations.
Now I have to watch.
Yeah, the Prime Ministers have had with the Queen. A great one is Margaret Thatcher back in the 80s. And she basically was letting the Queen know that I'm going to take the islands back from the Argentinians invaded, and she's like, okay, but interesting again is 75% accurate, and there's obviously the authenticity and the entertainment, but there's some great conversations and critical times in the UK where the Queen's had to sort of come in and she can offer her advice as well. But it's interesting.
Yeah, is it safe to say that the majority of British citizens hold the royal family in high regard?
I would say, the majority. A great example, unfortunately when the Queen passed, her funeral was the most aired TV. 5 billion people watched from around the world. So it's not even just UK. It's the whole.
No, I mean, it was
the whole
dominated the news cycle here. Shit, you lived here, right?
Yeah.
It was wild. All right, so we've been talking about the SAS selection. What was your experience going through that? Was it something that, obviously, when you decided to do it, you knew what you were getting into, but were you super nervous showing up? Was there anything that caught you off guard or took you by surprise?
So through my time in the Commando reconnaissance, it's almost like a natural stepping stone to Tier 1 Special Forces. Like I said, when I joined the military, I'd never even heard of the SBS. I never had any aspirations of being Special Forces, but my career was naturally funneling me in that direction. So there was guys I'd worked with who'd gone on and passed selection. Some had passed, some had failed, and so I had an insight into selection. I actually had a crack at selection after I was an instructor on the Commando course, and I blew my knee out. And so you only get 2 attempts on selection. So I knew I only had one opportunity left. So when I was back at the diving school, I applied for selection. So unlike here where you have CAG, the Delta Force have their own selection process, and DevGru, SEAL Team 6 have theirs. SAS and SBS is actually joint, so it's the same selection process. Prior to my selection, you could only go to the SBS if you're from the Royal Marines. It was 100% were from the Royal Marines, but for the SAS, you could join from the Royal Marines, from the Army, from the Parachute Regiment, from the RAF, or wherever. So a lot of Marines are actually going to the SAS because some of them may not like the diving, or may not, or just wanted to join the SAS as well. So the SBS were losing potential recruits to the SAS. So they then decided to open theirs up, try service. And the reason for that, one of the reasons for that was actually post 9/11 as well. They really got insight and to see somehow these other units were from the Army. But from the Royal Engineers, we have 450 divers in the Royal Engineers, and most of them, I'd probably say 75% are either commando or airborne trained anyway. So here's a whole pool of potential candidates. And so they then opened it up, try service as well. So for me, as I touched on earlier, I loved surfing as a young boy. I was in Free Commander Brigade, so I had the Green Beret, which the SBS have, and I was a senior dive instructor. So it was almost like the natural fit for me. What they introduced in these special forces, because guys were coming on selection, some guys were coming from units that didn't really have any experience or knowledge of what the selection process was, and some were going on either physically not prepared, mentally, or navigational wise, they were struggling, and so they would probably come off and lose one of their attempts. So to mitigate that, what the SAS and the SBS then did introduce was called a briefing course, which you can go on, and you can go on as many times as you want. And it's a week at each of the units. You do a bit of physical training, SBS, they put you underwater, do some pool training, do navigational stuff. And they sort of gauge of where you're at, whether you should be on the next selection or maybe go away, do some training and be on one later on. So we have 2 selections a year. One is a winter course and one is a summer course. And so for me, I went down, I did the SBS one, and then I did the SAS one the week later, and they're passing them both, and they said, yeah, you're ready for selection now. For me, the big takeaway was when I was with the SBS, they were in like frog shorts, t-shirts, he had Oakleys on, reef sandals. I'm like, this is my vibe, whereas the SAS guys were in like old school jungle kit. And so that's what I did. I volunteered for the SBS. And you know, on our selection process, it's 6 months long. You know, we started with 200 guys and we finished with 8 guys 6 months later. So it's about 95% attrition rate. I remember being told on selection, you know, be the grey man. You know, don't bring any attention. Being the grey man means basically just flying under the radar. Don't bring any attention to yourself for good reasons or bad reasons. Because as the numbers start dwindling, they'll soon, you know, get to know you. I was a grey man for about 2 minutes. I literally turned up on this course and we're sat on our Bergens in this car park getting ready to get given a number, like your numbers. You get given a number and which truck to go on. And then someone shouts out, stop. And I just stood up and he's like, straight away, he's like, why are you going SBS? And I said, I like diving. He's like, shit answer. So straight away, I was already on the instructor's radars. And the instructors are joint. They're from the SAS and SBS. The chief instructor and the course officer change each time from SAS and SBS. And so I remember the first 4 weeks is the hills phase, which basically you're on your own, you got a map, and you're going from checkpoint to checkpoint to checkpoint. And you're building up your navigational skills, your fitness. And then on the 4th week, you have a test week. We have to come in on the times. And for the listeners, it basically works on 4 kilometers an hour, which doesn't sound that fast. But it's you looking down on a map from it. So if there's a mountain in the way, you've got to get over it. And so yeah, as you go to the checkpoints tend to be on the top of a hill. And there's a couple of instructors in a tent on the top of the mountain. And then they basically give you tell them, you point to them where you are on the map. They give you the next grid reference. I mean, you work out time, speed, distance, tell them which direction you're going. So these 2 instructors, one was called Nasty Nick and the other guy was called Mick, and I won't give his surname away, compromise him, but they were both engineers. One was an airborne engineer and one was a commando engineer where I was from. And so they were like, and they were both SAS. I was like, why are you going and I said, I like diving. And like, shit answer. So they made me pick up a rock. I had to stick this rock in my Bergen. And they made sure, you know, they took a photo of it. They passed it on to the DS. And so when I finished it, to make sure the rock was in there. And this went on for about 2 weeks. So I'm like, hang on, I'm carrying extra weight than the other guys. Anyway, I went home for the weekend, and then so the SBS are based in Poole, which is probably like the San Diego of the US for the UK. It's on the south coast. We've got Bournemouth there, which is a beautiful beach, and Hereford, where the SAS is based up in the England-Welsh border. It's in the middle of nowhere. It always rains, and so I found I googled Bournemouth Beach, and there was a heat wave, and there was a newspaper taking photos of like these topless women on Bournemouth Beach. So I printed that off. I Fabloned it, I waterproofed it, and put it in my map pocket. Anyway, Monday morning, I'm running up this hill, and then there they are. Nick and Mick were in there, and they're like, right then, Stott. He said, why are you going SBS? And I put my weapon on my feet, keep it out of the mud, and I pulled out and I said, because that's not in Hereford. And they both laughed, and they were like, good answer. And I never picked up a rock. And so I made sure that I kept that in my map pocket for the rest of the selection. But they're trying to do is, they're just trying to test you and, push you. I mean, also one of the ethos of special forces is humor, so I gave it back. And so I became one of the first. There was another guy in there as well going in the army. He became one of the first army guys to pass special boat service. And I think now 15% the SBS come from the army. Oh, okay. Wow. And I don't think it's because of, we opened the floodgates. There was other situations. People weren't aware that during the height of the war on terror, when Afghan and Iraq were on operation, SAS were solely in Iraq and SBS was solely running Afghanistan. Yeah. And so when obviously Iraq was tapering off. The guys are like, I want to go where the action is. And so naturally they were getting, and then they introduced Special Forces Support Group, which was it's a bit like the Ranger Battalions who support the Special Forces. And it was comprised of Parachute Regiment, Royal Marines and RAF Regiment. So, and what they tended to do, they'd stick the Royal Marines with the SAS in Iraq, and they stick the Parachute Regiment with the SBS in Afghanistan. So these Parachute Regiment were seeing what the SBS were doing, were like, I'm going there.
Yeah.
And so we were naturally getting guys anyway. So changed direction.
Yeah. So in that first 4 weeks of navigation, it sounds like that's very similar to the CAG selection.
Yeah.
You have no idea how many points you're going to have for the day and how far it's going to be, and you don't know if you were fast enough. Like, is it vague that same way?
There's routes that you do on each selection, and then there's new routes as well that they introduce. So it's really interesting. I talked about the winter course and the summer course. Some people think one is advantageous over the other. Like winter course, in the mountains, the clag might be into navigation is going to be harder than a summer course where it's a clear day. But you then, by the end of the 6 months, you're doing your survival course in the summer, which is fine, whereas you're doing your survival course in the winter. So there isn't one that over the other. But yeah, to your question, there's certain routes that you know. But I remember I didn't get an opportunity to go do any of those routes because I was a senior diving instructor. I was still running my courses. I didn't get an opportunity to go out and recce any of these. But there were some guys on my selection from the Parachute Regiment, and they volunteered to be drivers on the last 2 selections before to drive the vehicles and drop the guys off. And they had real exposure of all the routes. But I remember one day, like I said, I came in with these 2 guys, and the DS was like, the 2 guys said, that's it, so it's finished for the day. And then the DS is like, no, he goes, your next checkpoint is such and such, which is about 7 miles away or whatever. So I started running off, but the 2 guys were like, no, I'm done. Because mentally, they thought that was it for the day. Yeah. And that's all they had it, And so when he sort of surprised them with this other checkpoint, they voluntarily withdrew, whereas I didn't really know what it was. And I started running off. And, got about 200 meters up and I could hear him shouting. Yeah. And I looked back and he's like, come back. So I came back and he said, no, that was it.
Oh, wow.
But he was just testing them.
Yeah.
Because he knew they'd been on before, and that's the thing is with selection, you have to be self-motivated. Yeah. The instructors don't shout at you as well. And so as when you're on the ground, you think you're at the end of the mission. It's not, it's just a start. So they'll put a couple of little surprises in like that.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, we do the same thing in the SEAL teams with, or in BUDS rather, especially like with surf torture, where like they have these very specific tables of, okay, if the ambient temperature is this, the water temperature is this, we can put them in for 7 minutes and then they have to be out for 4 minutes, and then they can go in for 3 minutes and have to be out for 5 minutes, so they're sticking to that. The students obviously have no idea, A, that even exists, or B, what it is. So similarly, like they may send you out there, come back, send you out there, come back, and then, okay, we're going out there again, and everybody locks arms and walks out. And before they actually have you sit down in the water, they say, all right, turn around and come back. But guys will quit, on the way out there, and then they see us come back and we didn't have to get in, and it's like, mind game. Fuck, yeah.
Yeah.
So that's 4 weeks long. Yeah. Is it 7 days a week, or is it 5 days a week?
It's about 5 days a week, except for the last week, which you start on the Sunday. So on test week, you have to come in on the time or faster than the time. So when I say 4K an hour, the best thing to do is aim for 6K an hour. Yeah. Because should you have a navigational error or an issue, you're not then pushing for the time. So the best sort of gauge is you're walking up the mountains. And then any straights and downhill, you're jogging or running. That's the best way to do it. And then obviously from the start of the hills phase to where you are now, that the weight's increased as well. So you have it, on the final week, you have about 70 pounds in your back, minus the food and water. Yeah. And then you have all these tests. And I remember, so there's a couple of pass or fails right at the beginning. There's the combat fitness test, which you've got to do 8 miles in 1 hour and 40, just led by the instructors. The rest of the army is normally 2 hours. It's 1 hour 40. So that's a pass and fail on the very first day. And that's an indicator whether everyone's trained or not. At the end of that first week, we have a famous run. It's called the Fan Dance. So the biggest mountain in Wales is called Penny Fan. And you go up to the top, you run off and you come back. And
What's
I think
the elevation?
Sorry?
What's the elevation on it?
I actually don't know what the elevation. Nothing like what you guys have in America. I've got a mountain behind my house in Orange County. It's bigger than anything we've got in the UK, and it's just like the smallest one in the area. Yeah. But it's quite a climb. There's a thing called Jacob's Ladder, which is quite steep. It's not so much the thing; it's just the last point. And you have to do 24 kilometers in 4 hours. So that's at a 6K pace. So they test you on speed. Again, that's a pass and fail. I mean, the rest is all on you. But on test week, you have to come in on the times, and then the very last the last day is about 30 kilometers. Then you have a 4-hour rest, and then you got to do then 40 miles in 20 hours through the night. Yeah, but you're just lads are just fatigued. But that's the hills phase. So you tend to lose guys either not trained physically or mentally prepared, or injury. Injury is quite a big one as well on that. And then, you finish the hills phase, and it's quite a big thing. I mean, the instructors still don't even know your name at this point.
Yeah. Is that where most of out of the 200 or 192 that you lost, most of them were in that hills phase?
Most of them is in that hills phase. I mean, the next one is the jungle phase, which we'll go into.
Yeah, before we get to jungle, logistically, what's the setup like? Are you guys, do you check in and there's a barracks that you're all staying in? And like food-wise, do they feed you actually prepared meals, or is it all like MRE kind of shit?
No, there's prepared meals, yeah. So obviously selections in Wales, and there's a camp called Bridge, and it's an old camp. It's wooden huts, but they have catering in there for you. I mean, there's extra meals as well because you're doing an arduous course. So, but when you're out in the daytime, it's whatever you want to take with you. I remember my instructor, because guys are testing and trying all these new things. I did it before we even had camelbacks. So we used to sew our water bottle pouch onto our belts on the Bergen, because it was in quick access, and so guys were testing and trying different things, and some people I quite happily eat food and run, but some guys don't, but then they had a thing called Slim Fast. Have you ever heard of Slim Fast? Yes. So these were great because they had 1,200 calories, and it was just like a milkshake. So we would just be taking the Slim Fast, and I remember our chief instructors why is everyone on a diet? And it was up to you what you carried along there. From my time, I remember being on the Commando course, all these students used to have Haribo and stuff which gives you a short boost of energy. But what I always found, we had a thing called pork pies. It was pork meat inside like a pastry. Those bananas, any other pastries. Normal food is what I would do. I didn't really like these gels, but that was up to you what you carried in a day. But when you're back at camp, there's food laid on for you. Yeah,
and in terms of what's happening at night, or outside of when you're actually doing the testing, is it just guys prepping their gear and relaxing?
Because by the time, depending on what wagon, because the wagon won't go until that wagon's full. So if you get in quick in the day and the wagon's full, you've got a bit more time to do your admin. But if you're doing the course, for example, in the winter, it gets dark about 5 o'clock at night anyway. So you're coming in at night, and in the morning it's still dark. Summer's a bit better. You can dry off your kit. So when you get back, it's literally foot admin. Feed yourself, prep your kit for the next day. Make sure that, because if you don't, some guys are if it's 55 pounds, some guys are really playing with those numbers, but it's not the same scale as the instructors are using. So I always say go 57, 58 to be safe, because if you go under, they'll give you a rock. Wow. Yeah. So those guys who always playing with their kit. But we had quite a good room. We made sure that 9 o'clock at night the lights were off. Yeah. Because I call them kit fiddlers. Yeah. These guys would just be fiddling with their kit all night, and it's it doesn't really matter.
Yeah. Do you develop relationships with those guys, or is it pretty individual?
Some of the guys you would have probably met from your briefing course, and what we did in the SBS, so you did your briefing course, you would have met some of the guys before, but before you go on selection, you have a week with the SBS as well. Yeah. And what they do is they make sure that all your paperwork's in place, all your doctor, your dental forms, because what you don't want to do is go there and then realise you've got some documentation missing. Yeah. And so that was a good thing about the SBS. It gives you that week for guys to bond. Yeah. And then, so you're already familiar with guys on selection.
Do you know how many guys you lost in that first 4 weeks? Once you started jungle, what was it whittled down to from 200?
I don't know the exact numbers, but
ballpark.
Ballpark. I'd probably say we lost about 80 guys.
Wow.
Yeah. And so whether that was injuries, I mean, some guys would probably go to the instructors and you realize they're not there the next day, but you're not all on the same wagons the next day. So you just, all you can really gauge was every morning on the parade square, the numbers were slowly going down. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
All right. So you finish that, you go to jungle. What was jungle like?
So in between jungle and that, so what we do is, the officers go away and they do officers week. So they have their own sort of selection process where they're doing estimates and planning and stuff like that. And then for us guys, we then start doing, because we come from different backgrounds, commandos, airborne, normal army, navy, things like that, is they start teaching their TTPs and their SOPs. So we're obviously getting prepared for the jungle. So it's like the IA drill, the action on drills, compromise, and all these things, patrol fighting drills, section attacks. I mean, what they're doing then is they're trying to gauge what experience you've had before, because they're then going to start making the teams for the jungle. They don't want to have like a whole team of Royal Marines, because them guys are going to be, they want to mix it up.
Yeah.
But also from a weapon standpoint, we use the C8, the Marco. The only units that use that is Special Forces. So it's the first time we've used these weapon systems.
Yeah.
So for us, I don't think here, obviously, you use the same weapon system, so you're familiar with it. We're now having to learn about a whole new weapon system, new radios, new comms kits that we haven't been exposed to before. So that takes about 3 weeks. And then we then fly to Brunei in Indonesia, Borneo, to the jungle. And then when you arrive there, you're acclimatized. Literally, the instructors are already there. They've been there a couple of weeks setting up the jungle camp, and you land them, and it's straight into a beach run. Wow. And this is interesting because on the hills phase, you've got guys who are very strong with kit. I mean, you've got more leaner guys who probably were struggling. But then it's the reverse. When you go on the beach runs, these guys are sprinting. So the guys who are used to kit are now at the back. And so, I mean, it's typical with the mind games. I remember I was very good at it because it was the same PT we used to do at the dive school, and I'd just left there. And so I was there running alongside the instructor, and I could see him looking to the side, and I'm still there. And I'm, so I sort of dropped off him a bit. But then he would drop off and someone else would come in. So there's no point even trying to race him. But you go along the beach. I mean, you do carries and stuff like that, and they're just breaking you down. But what they're doing is just trying to acclimatize you quite quick. And then everything we do is live firing. And then in the daytime, we'll be doing break contact drills in the jungle, just one after the other. And what they're looking for is safety. Yeah. Everything's about safety. And obviously doing it correctly. And then we do beach runs in the evening. And then you're prepping your kit. You're also having lessons. There's lessons that they were teaching you during the 3 weeks back in UK, and then you have additional lessons. And then, you then fly into the jungle. And then you're in the jungle for 28 days.
Wow.
But this
brutal
is
weather, I assume.
Again, it depends with the winter and the summer course. So I remember we did a winter course, and our course officer was fuming because it didn't rain once on the mountains. And I remember on endurance, the last march in 20 hours, it was a full moon.
Yeah.
He was losing his rag. He's like, you guys haven't experienced, but when we got to the jungle, it was the wettest jungle in 10 years.
Oh, wow.
We had monsoons, and so it did catch us up on that. But again, this is where, each day you go to the schoolhouse in the morning, and you do patrols for a few days, you come back, but you'd see numbers dropping off. But what they do here is they sort of play mind games with you as well, and they're sort of telling you, because it's quite claustrophobic, the jungle as well. I remember one day turning up on the range, and we carried the kit there, and about a 3K walk in the jungle, which is hard, but it's a cut track anyway.
Yeah.
And the instructor just comes to me, and he's like, if I ever see, they've already started the range, if I ever see weapon handling like that, you'll be on the next helicopter. I hadn't even been on the range yet. So I'm like, oh, okay, it's my day.
Yeah.
That they're going to sort of focus in on you. Because if there's any sort of doubt, they'll be like in your ear, just give up now, just save yourself. But I always remember something my chief instructor said. He said, let us fail you, don't fail yourself.
Yeah.
They're the only ones who say you're not going to pass. And so we had a team of 4 guys, and I'd come from the dive school. the instructors when we were back in UK and we were doing the contact drills. You know, he had me alongside some Marines and paras, you know, corporals and lance corporals. And then I ended up doing a full-on he gave me the responsibility, thinking I was Navy, not really looking into my background. I did a full section attack, and he's like, "Where are you from?" I said, "Oh, I was Commando reconnaissance." He's like, "Oh, that makes sense." But actually a good friend of mine, he ended up being the patrol commander. He was a corporal and I was a sergeant, and they wanted to test if there was any friction. I loved it. I was like, "You crack on." Yeah. So, but we, you see guys, and the helicopter comes in every morning, and the guys can hear it's a Huey as well. You can hear the Huey coming in, and you know, some guys are just like, "I'm off." Yeah. I'm like, "Why are you off?" You know, some guys come up to me, "I've had enough." Yeah. And it can be any sort of reasons, either self-doubt that they're not ready. But if you voluntarily withdraw in the jungle, you only get one attempt. You can't come back. Yeah. So it has to be the right reason. And you know, we used to get blueies. Do you have blueies in the military? So blueies is part of our postal service. It was like a blue bit of paper, and then you fold it. But it's free postal service for forces. Oh, okay. They're called blueies. Yeah. They're blue. And so some guys would get blueies from their wives, and she may be having a bad day. She's there with the kids, and you know, you're off the other side of the world. And so they, you know, sometimes read the letters and say, "Right, I'm off." Yeah. But they may have to wait another week or two for a flight home. Yeah. By which time the next set of blueies have come in, and she's like, "I was only having a bad day," and he's like, "It's too late." Yeah. So I remember our chief instructor saying, "Look, make sure all your house is in order when you come on selection. Don't want any distractions from the outside world." And so, so for me, there was various reasons that the guys came off. But then you finish. I remember we have a 10-day final exercise, and it's all hard routine. Then there's no hammocks. You sleeping on the floor for the 10 days. It's full routine, and we do like an ambush and a camp attack. And then I was the troop sergeant for the camp attack, and I remember doing the ORBAT for the helicopters coming in, and I put all the instructors on, then put my team on, and then I was just sat with a couple of my friends. And what you're doing then is you're self-analysing whether you've done enough to pass the hills phase, because this is a cull phase of selection. And then the instructors fly straight back to the camp, and they then get together, and then they go through all the students, who's passed and who's failed. But what's quite good, unique I like about it, is the final, you'll have an instructor for the first 18 days, or 2 instructors, but not everyone gets on. You know, there can be friction and things like that. So for the final 10 days, they swap your instructors over, so they've got a fresh set of eyes looking at you. So if there is any sort of issues, you know, that can be brought out in that briefing. And so what they then do, they do that, and then they fly back to UK, but you don't fly back for another 3 or 4 days. Oh, wow. And so you're there, and you know, we have a barbecue in the evening, the instructors and the guys get together, and you know, I remember one of my instructors sort of gave me the nod. He's like, "Yeah, you've done enough." You know, so there's always like these secret nods going on. Yeah. I mean, some guys haven't been given a nod. Yeah. So like, "Did you get the nod?" "Yeah." No. So they're now self-analysing, and it's the longest 4 days of your life. I bet. And then you fly back to Hereford, and then you get in front of the course officer, and then they say whether you're going to progress or not. So it's quite a big cull at that point. So even though I got the nod, I was still very, very nervous. Yeah.
And what numbers are you down to at that point about?
So you're now. So we probably lost a good 40 guys at this point. So I think with the other 3-week phase as well, we're probably now in and around the 30s, 20s left on course. And what they say now is that actually unless something really serious happens, passing the jungle phase is almost like, you're in. You still got 3 months to go. Yeah, you know, you can start growing your hair and things like that, which for me didn't really work. But but we still got a long way to go. But it just means you've done the big hurdles.
Usually, if you get to that point, you're probably going to make it.
You're probably going to make it.
Like Hell Week and Buds.
Yeah. But there's guys who don't like parachuting. We lose guys who's on parachuting. You know, then we do the counterterrorism phase as well, which is a whole bag in itself. You know, firing in the jungle or on the battlefield is very different from going in a blacked out room, and you know, that's where your weapon safety comes in. And so you end up still losing people, guys on the survival evasion courses. We've still got all that to do. Yeah.
So 4 weeks of mountains, 4 weeks of jungle. right after that is parachuting?
Right after that is the parachuting. They brought the parachuting forward because it used to be right at the end, and it's like them realised that actually guys were scared of jumping. So
how long is that?
That's about 4 weeks as well.
Is it static line and free fall?
So that's just static line.
Okay.
You get static line squares, and then when you go to your units, if you end up in air troop, you then do your free fall.
So 4 weeks of parachuting, then it's anti-terrorism after that?
Then you do your SERE course, your survival evasion SERE course. You then do a comms course, all the radios, more advanced stuff. And then, it's your counterterrorism.
All right, so hills, jungle, parachute, SERE.
SERE. And the CT phase.
Okay. And each one is about 4 weeks?
Each one's about 4 weeks, yeah.
But you have, a few days in between each that...
Yeah, and there's other things they do in between. Like we had the 3 weeks doing the between the hills and the jungle, doing the section attacks and getting used to the weapons, and we have more comms. So it adds up to 6 months in the end.
Okay. In the parachuting and SERE and counterterrorism, can you just kind of briefly walk through those three of summarizing it?
Yeah. So for the parachute one is like a static line square is so some of the guys have probably come from the parachute regiment, where theirs is actually static line rounds. They're not actually jumping out the tailgate and steering themselves. So we do all of that. We do the wet jumps as well into the sea. We ended up having to go out to Cyprus on ours, and just because it was a better weather. So we went out to Cyprus and did that. So you've got a varied experience already. There's guys, like I was already static line square from my time in brigade reconnaissance.
Yeah.
So for me, it was just a refresher, whereas you've got guys who've never jumped before.
Yeah.
So you have to start right back at the beginning. Yeah, they're not going to say, well, you guys do this. You all start from square one, point one, which is why it takes the 4 weeks. And all these courses, at the end of the selection, you think, oh, yeah, I've done all these courses. It basically just gives you a baseline, a basic baseline that you can slot into a team, and then you do all your additional course. But the SERE course is survival, evasion, resistance, extraction. And then at the end of it, you have to have a 36-hour interrogation, which is actually critical. You've got to do that. I remember one course, one of the guys managed to escape and evade from Scotland all the way down to England, which was great, but he still needed to be captured. So he had to wait 6 months for the next course. Wow. So you're moving between 20 and 30 miles a day.
Is that a 4 week thing too?
No, it's a 1 week course. Okay. That's 7 days and the 36 hours. And we had these grey coats, these old style grey coats, a bit like Peaky Blinders.
Yeah.
And in it, we had like our button compass, just basics. So there's no military equipment, and you're moving from grid to grid, and you're having to survive on the land and also evade a hunter force. There's a hunter force looking for you for the whole week as well.
Yeah.
And at the beginning of the week, you're all spread out across like Wales or Scotland, and then you start funneling in because you do need to get captured.
Yeah.
But if you get caught as well before then, the instructors, they beast you. They give you a good 12-hour thrashing, and you're back out. And the purpose, and each night we then meet an agent who give us our new grid, and then we just keep going on. But what the purpose of that is sleep deprivation. Your calorific intake is low. You're not eating much as well, so you're absolutely fatigued. Because if you went and did an interrogation thing for 36 hours fresh, and you've had sleep and you've had food, you'd probably breeze it.
Yeah.
So they have to get you to the point of exhaustion, and then you then get interrogated. And then prior to us going on the SERE course, we have some lessons about what to expect when we're in that process. And then you get interrogated for 36 hours. Well, I'd already been interrogated before because I did it with brigade reconnaissance. And that's what caught, on our course, that caught them out slightly, because I did the 24-hour interrogation, then I did the 36-hour interrogation. And then right at the end of our selection, what they wanted to do, they wanted to simulate an incident which had happened in Iraq where 2 SAS guys got captured. And it was basically a short hostage rescue. And when that happened, right at the last day of selection, we sort of knew it was coming. The guys got, literally gave us a good hide in. And then I remember going in and then getting interrogated. And the interrogator was the same guy who interrogated me a couple of months before.
Oh, wow.
But also 18 months before. And so he was asking me questions, and I was just non-compliant. And And then my instructor then, put a sandbag over my head, lifted the sandbag off. My chief instructor's there, he's got white armbands, which means you can talk to him. He's like, Stotty, what are you doing? I said, this is shit. He said, what do you mean it's shit? I said, this same guy asked me the question. And it basically was asking me what food I wanted and what drink.
Yeah.
And amenities. And I said, well, I answered him twice before and he never gave me that. So why would he do it now?
Yeah.
And then realize actually in our doctrine, you can only be exposed to interrogation twice in your whole career. The whole shock and capture goes.
Really?
Yeah.
Like that's a legal thing?
Yeah, not a legal thing. It just means you're not having the same impact because you've gone through it twice before.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So selection were then unaware that actually the guys coming on selection have already been through the SERE process.
Yeah, I gotcha.
So they actually changed it because I ended up dying on that. They shot me in the end. I was like, oh shit. Because I was like, he's not going to kill me because it's the last day of selection.
Yeah.
They're not going to spend millions of pounds and then kill me off. So that was interesting. So we had the SERE phase for 36 hours, and then some guy. I remember a guy on ours actually. And then in between your interrogations, you're in stress positions. They're keeping you awake. They're putting you in positions, a sandbag over your head, your hands behind your head and stuff like that.
Are you living quarters wise? They have you in like little boxes or?
Oh, we didn't know where we were.
Okay.
You ended up in like a shed in the middle of nowhere. I mean, they have all the white noise, the dogs, and then the different types of interrogators, the good cop, the bad cop, all those scenarios, and cameras in your face. They're trying to go through all the, and it's a great process because at the end you then sit down with they have psychologists there and explain, because they said one of the things you've got to try and do is obviously relate to your captor. Stay alive as long as possible for the guys to come get you is what it is. But you're not allowed to show any sort of form of aggression or anything like that. And the woman said to me, "Oh, you showed aggression." I was like, "When?" And what it was I came in the room one day and the guy, you have no laces in your boot and you got no socks on, and I had cuts on my feet, and he took my boot off, put it on his leg, and got a wet wipe and started cleaning my toes, which for me was like, and I'm just like, apparently my facial expression was like, what's he doing? So they go through all those scenarios with you.
Yeah. It sounds very similar to the United States SERE school. Each branch has different variations of it, but it's all based, and it's very similar length and structure and everything. I will say we, at least for the Navy side, Navy Marine Corps side, the one that I went through, it's basically the size of like a dog crate made out of concrete, but there's like this long row of it, one side, and then another one so you're facing. And there's like this little canvas flap that you put down if you're going to take a shit. You shit in a coffee can, and the only time you can put that flap down is if you're shitting. Now, of course, people would put it down and pretend to shit just to cover up and try to pass notes and whatever. And you're sitting on this like little wooden, like miniature stool almost, where it's just like this tiny little platform that just raises your ass up like 2 inches. It just makes it way more uncomfortable. With your elbows on your knees and your palms facing up, and then your legs are crossed at the ankles, sitting there, in this hunched over in this box with your ass up, and for a day and a half or whatever. But do they slap you in the training? Because they slap the shit out of us.
Yeah, you get man. It's trying to maintain that, almost to confuse you. You think at first, they're just interrogated, but then they start playing mind tricks. Is this real? Is it not? They do. I remember, and the guys that fail that phase as well. Some guys get caught being in a farmer's house or something, sat at the table having a full-on breakfast, because the instructors know everyone. Yeah. So some guys get caught doing that and get kicked off selection. And
do they kick them out, or they recycle them through SERE?
It depends on, by that time they've obviously proved themselves on the hills. They probably have to. It all depends.
Yeah.
All depends.
I suppose if you're having breakfast at a farmer's table, they may say, "Fuck you, you're out of here." To me, I would respect them enough. Like, if you're that ballsy, like, you just need to go through it again.
Well, again, one instructor said, "Look, it happens. Just don't get caught. That's all it is. So just be smart about it." But and then there was a guy on mine actually. I remember when put the sandbag over his head, he just went mad. But then he came off, but soon realised that his brother had committed suicide, but hung himself with a sandbag over his head.
Oh wow!
And so he was just going through a whole fucking PTSD issue as well. So you're still losing guys at this point.
Yeah. For the actual field craft portion of the week leading up to the interrogation when you're captured part, did they do a lot of instruction to teach you, and did you think it was actually worthwhile or kind of cheesy?
No, it's a good question actually. We had a guy.
Bear Grylls.
No, not Bear Grylls. No. He was before Bear Grylls. He was called Ray Mears. His name was. He was like a survival expert. And I remember, his things would be like he'd teach you, right, if you can get a teaspoon of sugar, some brake fluid, and I'm like, well, if we can get all of that in a newspaper, we're not in a survival situation. So he ended up not doing it on selection, because everyone thinks you're survival experts. We're actually not. We get taught enough, because for us, we're not going to stay in the same position and start building all these fancy Ewok villages. You know what I mean? We literally need to be remaining covert and moving from position to position. But there was an old lady. The mushroom woman, she was about 80 years old, and the lads were just fascinated with her. She knew everything about fungus, where to find mushrooms that you could eat, testing things like that. So for us, we had the basic field craft. Some guys may have done survival before, but it's not a survival exercise, because you need to be moving, and it's basically what food can you get, what water can you get whilst on the move. So we're not great. I wouldn't say we're great survival experts, Yeah.
Same here. I mean, and even the stuff that they taught you, it was pretty rinky dink. Like some of the stuff, it's like, man, I wouldn't take the time to weave a fucking wooden basket to try to catch fish. Like you sit there for 6 hours fucking with it. It's like you could be, 5 miles further down. Whatever. But it's like I said, it sounds pretty similar. But so then the last phase goes to counterterrorism, and I assume it's similar to a lot of the training that we do, but it's it's pretty dynamic. It's pretty stressful, because there's hostage scenarios if you shoot the wrong target. Yeah. If you sweep your buddy, like, is it live fire? Is it not? How does that?
Everything's live fire. Yeah. So everything from the day you start selection is live firing. Yeah. And the reason for that is there's no complacency then, and that's why the weapon safety is so important. But again, you're doing different methods of insertion. We're blowing in through windows. Guys are coming in, sweeping the rooms. There's all the basic calls that you need to do, but it's all that situation awareness where the rest of your team are, and and again you lose guys on that, because in the jungle where they can physically see, and then they can orientate themselves. Some of them get very disorientated when you're flowing flash crash and smoke grenades and things like that. I mean, there's lasers everywhere. It can be quite confusing. So that's the final phase. But that phase, as I said before, that gets you to the start point in your unit. When you then do, so again for your listeners here, so here with your SEAL Team 6 and Delta Force, they do hostage rescues overseas. We do ours homeland and overseas as well. Yeah. So we have to train for both.
So in a scenario where there's a terrorist hostage situation in London, you guys are going in to do it.
Yeah, the most famous one, the Iranian embassy, Operation Nimrod, where it got to the point. So the police do it, but there's certain weapon systems that they can't cope with, and so there's a process without going into it where the police will then hand over to the special forces. So we end up doing, I ended up doing all our police driving courses. So we were on pagers as well. So sometimes on 30 minutes notice to move from your pager going off to you being in a helicopter.
Oh, wow.
So that's the big distinction between our tier 1s and tier 2s is that hostage rescue capability. But we also do aircraft, cruise ships, oil rigs, the diving, you do all that when you get to your unit as well. So this is just bog standing 4 weeks in a building.
So that's fascinating. And I, admittedly, my ignorance is showing. I had no idea that you guys did countryside stuff in country. What is the British law enforcement's highest, like our FBI's HRT or the hostage rescue, like the non-military? What's the highest?
Yeah, we have SO19. They're called, which is the police SWAT. Okay. But it might not be in all the cities. Primarily London, and then we have like the SO17, which is their intelligence. But we do joint training with them, which is and where this really came into its own, because everyone had this perception in special forces we just go in and kill everyone, which isn't the case. We don't do that. The great one with the Iranian embassy, the go no go is when they killed a hostage and threw him on the steps. 17 minutes later, the SAS went in, killed all the terrorists, bar one who tried to get out, and rescued all the hostages. So everyone sort of has that as a reference point. But then when we got the London Olympics, when we got approved for London Olympics back in 2008, obviously that's a big thing for UK SF and the law enforcement. And so we do a lot of cross training. Yeah. So that's part of our black phase when we're in the UK. Is you do a lot of training with the police and the law enforcement, and we go through scenarios.
Sure, that's really cool, man. So the SO19, like, there's a level at which a scenario will say, "You guys aren't it. We're going with you guys are the varsity squad," then, basically, right?
Yeah.
Like, worst case scenario, you guys are going in.
I don't know what it is now, but when I was in, it was like they could deal with a pistol or anything bigger. It was handed over to SF.
Wow.
Yeah.
So with that being part of your responsibility, to me, like, that's hard to even imagine, because there's such a separation of military doing anything in the United States.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, if anything under the Department of Defense is going to be utilized in the United States, it's usually the National Guard, and they have a very different, almost like crowd control, emergency support, natural disaster help, like it's kind of broad spectrum. Like, they're not going to be doing hostage takedowns or whatever. It's very, I don't want to use the word generic, but it's very standardized, I guess. And the thought of, like, SEAL Team 6 or Delta executing a raid in the United States is, like, doesn't even enter your mind. Like, that would never, ever happen. It would always be FBI's HRT or something like that. With that being a top shelf responsibility, and one that I would only imagine that you guys would not just take seriously, but that would be something you'd be pretty honored and proud to do as a responsibility. Does that change your ability to have certain things at your house, weapons, equipment wise, or are you don't get to have anything at your house?
You don't get to have anything. So outside of the camp or that military role, we're unarmed.
Like, you can't even have a shotgun?
Can't even have you can have a shotgun if you're a hunter, but you have to go through a process. You need to have a reason for that.
Do most of your guys have something in their house like that?
They have nothing at all. So we had there was a school shooting back in, I want to say 90s now, Dunblane in Scotland, and a lone guy came in, killed 30 kids. From that moment on, they killed all guns in the UK.
Yeah.
Obviously, there's farmers who have shotguns, and they have to go through certain protocol. I sit on the board of Scottish Target Shooting, which is a sport shooting, and just that alone, the hoops that they have to jump through. So we have nothing.
So I'm real curious to get your perception or your opinion, I guess, on that now. Having lived in the United States for a while, seeing how kind of ingrained the gun culture is, how readily available they are, and how important that is to most of us. Not all of us. I mean, there's plenty of people who are anti-gun or that think that they should be completely outlawed or whatever. But most Americans that are even neutral or right-leaning are usually pretty heavy gun. I mean, even I know plenty of liberals that have guns and want them and what have you. But anyway, I'm always kind of fascinated by the mentality of, if we remove guns, then there won't be, big groups of people being killed. As somebody who grew up with that being kind of the backbone of your guys' societal perception and take on gun ownership and how stringent it is, now living in the United States and seeing how it is here, what is your opinion on how you think it should be?
I know it's a great question. I come from a culture where we don't have it, but I know that UK, they're now having, take the guns away from the general public. They'll find the criminals will find it, and terrorists will find a way of getting a gun. So for me, I'm not used to it in UK, but for me here, give me a gun, because I want to be able to assist in a situation. But I know, like in UK now, they're really struggling with knife attacks. They'll find other ways. And so I think for me, if you have the right training, I think there should be a training process for it. I think definitely ex-law enforcement, definitely ex-military who prove themselves to be able to handle a weapon and understand weapon safety. And then those who aren't from a law enforcement military background should still have the option, but they have to go through a training process. That's what I think. But I agree with your Second Amendment. I know I've had some great conversations with people. It's very different from us in the UK. A great one was like COVID. I was like, well, if we didn't have a Second Amendment, we'd end up like Australia. That's a fair point. So but for me, it's all about, I like the idea, but it has to be obviously maybe a vetting process for mental health, but then training, but I think you should be able to, I would rather have and not need than need and not have. You know, if I see a situation, I'd love to be able to intervene.
Yeah. Has there ever been an instance when you lived in England where something happened, a situation took place where you thought to yourself, "Fuck, I wish I had a gun"?
Not as a civilian.
No.
Not as a civilian. No.
I am baffled, I guess, at.
We like to scrap our hands.
Yeah. It is surprising, I guess, if you're tasked with being a response force that, like, if they're willing to put that level of responsibility on you guys to go do anti-terrorism raids in your own country, that they don't allow a waiver, an exception of some sort for you guys to be able to have weapons in your homes.
Yeah.
Is it something you guys bitch about or ask about, or is it just
no,
everybody?
not really. Just because we're not used to it, you see, if that makes sense. But I remember some DevGru guys came over and they were on the Bin Laden raid, and so because of that, they were targeted globally, and so they were carrying in UK, but they had dispensations, and and that was the first time I was like, oh, we should get that.
Yeah. You're like, these motherfuckers.
These guys.
Not even fucking English.
Yeah.
That's wild. Man, it's such a fascinating pathway. So once you make it whittled all the way down to 8 people by the end of counterterrorism course.
For the SBS, 8 for SBS, and then it was probably the same that went SBS. We had about 16.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would imagine at that point, those 16 guys are pretty tight.
Yeah, we're very tight. And what's unique about ours as well, like here in the US, you have quite a big special forces community. Ours is quite small. So when best way is there's 97% commonality between both units. We have the SEAL delivery vehicle in the SBS, probably the other additional 3%. But because we've trained together and we've done the same selection process, we know we're all working on the same TTPs and SOPs. But the big difference is, should there be a hostage situation on a cruise ship or an oil ship, both units would come together because we need the numbers, but the command element from the SBS would run it. And then if it was on the land or an aircraft, the same with the SAS. You know, where there's been sort of issues in the past between the two units or you know, fallout was actually the Falklands War. So in the Falklands War in '82, the SAS were operating, the SBS were operating. SBS were under Navy, SAS were under the Army. So they didn't know where each other were. And the only SBS fatality was a blue on blue between the SAS and the SBS. And then so post Falklands War, they then formed UK Special Forces, where they all came under the one umbrella. So they needed to know what everyone was doing. But of course, you can imagine the friction between the two units back in the day. But I'm talking in the 80s now. Those guys have gone and left. Yeah. We now have joint selection. So you're working with guys. So some of my best friends are SAS and SBS as well. So and that's helped.
Yeah. So with that, you mentioned there's 2 classes a year, right?
2 classes.
So you're on average between both SAS and SBS, it's safe to say that less than 50 new operators per year are being put into the community. Yeah,
and obviously we felt that during, you know, the Afghan-Iraq war, because naturally you had guys who were getting killed, guys who were getting injured, and so, you know, one thing that I'm sort of proud of the UK is that they've maintained that standard. You know, they do say on day one of selection, when there's 200, we got enough room for all of you. Yeah. But if you don't hit the standard, then you're not coming through. So, but you know, we were starting to feel the pinch, especially towards the end of the Afghan, is that, you know, the guys are getting injured, and you know, we're not being able to hit our numbers. Yeah. And also, you know, prior to Afghan and Iraq, you know, the only sort of rounds going down and, you know, the action was coming from the special forces, which was a natural pull for the guys. But, you know, Afghan and Iraq, everyone was getting rounds down. Yeah. You didn't have to be in the special forces to be seeing action. Yeah. And so that also affected recruitment as well at a certain point.
Yeah. So about how many SBS and SAS operators are there at a given time?
Given time, I think when I was in, I think there was 250 in the SAS and about 200 in the SBS.
Yeah, wow, that is small.
And there's 4 Sabre squadrons in each, and they normally have between about, say, 28 and 35 guys in them, which is in the Sabre squadrons. And then you have all your training courses and all your other assets.
And what is a Sabre squadron?
So a Sabre squadron, you have 4 squadrons in the SBS: Z, X, M, and C. And then in the SAS, you have A, B, D, and G squadron. And so what they tend to do, so normally when you pass selection, you'll go to a Sabre squadron as a new guy. You'll do 4 years there, and then you'll leave and be like an instructor on selection or on the boat team, and then you come back, and so your career's going on. So with the Sabre squadrons, they're the ones that are deploying and getting the rounds down. So we used to do a 2-year rule-mont, and so what that would be, so my squadron, for example, we would do pre-deployment training for 6 months. We go to Afghan for 6 months. We then come back, and then we're on the green roll, which means responsible for anything going on globally. And then you're then on the black roll for 6 months, which is the counterterrorism.
Yeah.
And so that would rotate every 2 years. So that's 4 squadrons going through that whole process each time.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's just kind of a big round robin, if you will.
Big round robin, yeah.
Once you finished, and before you actually were assigned to one of the squadrons, is there a big ceremony or a notable one where they make a big deal out of you finishing, or is it just like, congrats, you made it, get the fuck over here?
Well, before I joined the SBS of old, they were from the Royal Marines, and so they never got anything. They used to just, the SAS would be presented their sandy beret and their blue stable belt, and the SBS would then be given a blue tracksuit. I mean, you've got 3 more months training. You've then got to do your SF boat course and your dive course. There was no real no recognition of being in the Special Boat Service. They now introduced a new cat badge and their own stable belt. So we literally, the SAS get theirs on their day, and then we have to wait until the Monday, and then the commanding officer will give it. And for you, it's like it's the biggest thing in the world.
Yeah.
But then literally you then just go straight and you get introduced to your squadron, and you're basically making the cup of tea and coffee.
Yeah, you're the booge boy.
Exactly. Yeah, you start back again, and but prior to that, you're always talking about selection, hearing about guys that are passing, but when you're in, you actually forget the selection process going on, and then right, we've got the next bunch of lads coming through. Yeah. So it's quite a good leveler. You're like, okay, here we go.
Yeah. All right, so you're essentially a booge boy showing up. You're the cabin boy with the mustache tattooed on your lower back for the guys. Was there any type of hazing rituals or anything beyond just, hey, do all of the shit work? Like, is there a welcome to the club party or anything like that, or is it just right into it?
Yeah, we have a bar called the Frog Bar, and so anyone who's on camp at the time will welcome us in, and we have no sort of hazing, a bit more grown up the unit for that, but that was all done when we were in the Commando forces. Yeah. But they have a thing called the Frog, and it was this big ceramic frog, and it was like filled with Guinness or lager, and there's a little hole right where his ass is, and you have to just literally drink.
This is the grown-up unit.
This is the grown-up. You drink from the frog basically, and that's you then going to. But then you go away and do your boat course and your dive course. But one thing I've noticed, interesting chatting to the US, that you guys have sort of incentivizations for going to the SEALs, monetary wise. When I did selection, I was a sergeant in the Royal Engineers. I had my airborne pay. I had my diving supervisor pay. Actually, it was higher than the starting pay in SF. So really? I knew when I passed this course, I was having a pay cut.
That's crazy.
Yeah. So wow. And then later on, you'll make up. So yeah. So I was
Is
drinking.
It still that way?
They introduced a new system that you couldn't lose additional quals straight away. You lose it over a certain period of time, so it's stacked up. But because it was like, well, what is the incentivization of going to SF if I'm getting, doing all this and then I get a pay cut?
Really.
I was an anomaly coming from the army. Being a diving supervisor and airborne as well. Yeah.
So. Did you jump right into that four cycle rotation?
Yeah. So when I joined the squadron, we were just going into the black roll.
Oh wow!
Yeah, so we were now ready to get signed off to go in the black roll. So you were still in the green roll. So we had our pages, and should we deploy? I did my boat and diving course first for 3 months, basically the dive course is closed circuit breathing sets you were talking about, and we go out to Gibraltar and do 6 weeks on that. Coming from a diving background, I'm very comfortable underwater, but my whole diving career I'd been using full face masks.
Yeah.
And so I was used to having as much air as what. Here's the first time I'd used half masks before and had the PU in my mouth. And when I was in the water, I was going through a set 50% quicker than the rest of the guys.
Yeah.
Because air was trickling out my nose. I couldn't control the air coming out my nose. It was like a muscle memory thing. And so, of course, I was getting a load of flack from the guys. Oh, you're a diving supervisor. You're not even getting a full set on this. Yeah. So in the end, we sort of compromised. What I did is you're buddied up to your diver on a line, and it's pretty much all you're doing is compass board swims for the first couple of weeks. Getting used to obviously working underwater, covering long distances. So you build up to a 5 kilometre swim to a hook on and a full climb is what we do. I mean, you're sticking limpet mines on boats. And so for me, I was like, right, I need to get a grip of this nose issue. So I did the next few dives with no dive mask.
Oh wow!
Just the BU in the mouth, and the guy next to me was on the compass board. But what that then is tripped my muscle memory in my nose, and I no longer was no trickling out my nose. So for me, that was an experience. It's the first time with the half mask. Had hundreds of hours of diving, but full face mask. And then we go to our boat course, and then I then joined the unit, and we were on the build up for the black roll. So we'd done the counterterrorism stuff on selection, but now we were doing it with full dive kit, swimming onto oil rigs, cruise ships, doing the climbs, and then, building up from there.
Yeah. The no mask is some old school remediation if I've ever heard it. What I find fascinating, here in the United States, all of our special operations, for the most part, like when we train, it's like, oh, we're going to Arkansas, we're going to Northern California, we're going to Florida to dive, we're going to, wherever. You guys are going to fucking Malaysia, Indonesia, Borneo, Gibraltar, Cyprus. It's like you guys have to go to all these super exotic other countries to train, which is cool though.
And America, we come to America as well.
Yeah. That's wild. So your first rotation in then was with the black.
Was in the black roll, yeah. So we have to build up and then get ready for the black roll. Then on that for 6 months, and then also you're going away on courses as well. So I went away and did my JTAC course, did my UAV course. I think I were chatting earlier. When I joined in 2007, they just started introducing the K9s to the UK Special Forces, which we adopted from the US. And I remember doing my JTAC course and. Coming back from that, and my sergeant major pulled me in the office, and he's like, "Right, Stott, there's a couple of courses. There's a K9 course, or there's a UAV course." And I was like, "Well, what's the K9 course?" Because it was the very first course that they'd done, so I had no sort of template or anyone else before me to speak to and ask what it was about. And he said, "Well, you're going to have a dog for 2 years." I'm like, "Oh my God, I'll be walking this dog. It's going to shit everywhere." And, I said, "What's the UAV course?" He goes, "Well, you go San Luis Obispo in California for 6 weeks." I was like, "Sold." Yeah. So actually I went away and did a UAV course, and a couple of my friends went and did dog course. And now in hindsight and reflection, it's the best course they'd ever done. Yeah. But, and a great asset to the team. So yeah, although you're going through these phases, these 6 months blocks, you're also going away. Guys are doing medics courses, linguist courses, demolition courses. You're getting yourself all these additional skill sets as well. Yeah,
and so you joined in at 07.
07, yeah,
for SBS, and from 07 to 2011. That's when you were.
I would end of 06, yeah, through to 2011. Yeah,
2011. In that 4 or 5 year period. So obviously you're like that rotation of black roll and all that. That's a year-long rotation about.
You by the time you come back on the black roll, it'll be another 2 years.
Oh, 2 years. Okay. So you did two rotations.
Two rotations. Yeah, 2 black rolls.
Did you do anything? Were you called for any real?
Yeah, I was very fortunate. In that short period of time, I missed out my opportunity in Afghan. When I was with the Commando forces.
So you never went to Afghanistan?
Not with the Commando forces, with the SBS I did. Yeah. And my first time on the ground, we did the first ever operational jump for the SBS.
Oh shit.
Yeah.
Wow.
So my first time in boots on the ground was actually jumping out of an AC-130. So I was like, yeah, this is cool. Yeah. And then I did the first ever operational jump for UKSF hostage rescue. We jumped into Somalia. Yeah. So for me, I did quite a lot in a short period of time. I think, Clint has a great saying on this. I remember Clint saying, before our era, the guys before our era, they'd be waiting for these operations every few years. We're doing them every night. Yeah. And so going back to my original thing, be careful what you wish for. Yeah. I'd wished I was there, but to do the first ever operational jump and going in, I was like, yeah, this is cool.
What was the actual mission that jump was the insertion for?
So we all got hey-ho trained. So each time every time you go out on rotation, the enemy understand your sort of TTPs and they evolve, and so we had to do that with them. So the problem we were having in Afghan, they were known as green eyes, because the only people that operate at night are SF, and they could see the NVGs, and so any sort of air movement in the area was always SF, and so any aircraft or helos coming into the area, you'd have squirters, they'd disappear, and so we were missing opportunities with the target. So what this capability was is basically we would jump in, team of 16, it would fly the chutes to a designated area, cache the chutes, we'd stick an IR silo on them, and then we'd move, sometimes moving up to 10 kilometers to the target area, and then we'd surround the target area, and then we'd call in the aircraft. But then as the aircraft are coming in to drop the guys, as they're squirting, we're already in position for them. Yeah. And they would then drop them onto target. The Chinooks, the twin-propelled helicopters, would then go, the CH-47s would then go pick up the chutes. And by the time they'd done that, come back, pick us up and go. So it basically was another method of insursion if we needed it, another asset to us.
And you guys did that once, right?
Yeah, we did that, yeah. That's my first ever operation with the SBS. So.
How much of that can you go into?
Probably not much. I feel we'll be compromising my SF stuff, yeah. I can only talk about stuff that's in the public domain. So things like, because we're slightly different from the US. I think you guys are quite, not open book, but you're not restricted. So when we start selection, we sign the Official Secrecy Act. And that basically means...
Well, you're out now, so you can say anything.
Well, no, it's for life. Yeah, apparently it's for life, yeah. So I had the whole process with my book. But what it means is... what the luxury we have now is Google. Yeah. There's so much stuff that's out there anyway in Google and the public domain. But as long as you don't talk about names of operations, current or guys and things that are going to compromise your search and rescue TTP, sort of TTP things. But stuff in general, like everyone knows we're in Afghanistan. If you say to me, where the SBS base, they're in Poole. Yeah. So the SERE course of old, the old area, when they did their SERE course, it was called the Big Five. You're only allowed to say 5 things. It was name, rank, religion, blood group, and name, rank,
serial number.
Yeah, that was it. Name, rank, number, blood group, religion. That was it. I mean, you literally, if you broke from that, you failed. Yeah. But obviously, over the years, the enemy have changed. Yeah. The enemy are like, well, I don't care. I'm just going to kill you. So it's about staying alive. So for us, you can say certain things, but it has to be in the public domain. Yeah. And so that's where I am pretty much with this, is I can't talk about on the ground. Yeah,
I gotcha. So I guess if we can just kind of hit the highlights then, I guess, of that period of time while you were there, how many times did you deploy to Afghanistan?
There was a couple of times to Afghanistan. Yeah. There was then obviously little hostage rescues, and we did some cross training as well. Yeah. But it's a busy period, the 4 years.
Would you say in terms of that time period and your guys' involvement there, a lot of gunfights and?
Yeah, every night we're out the door. We wouldn't go out every night. Everyone sort of says what we were trying to do is disrupt the infrastructure. The high value targets, those that respond to almost like your quartermasters, your generals and things like that. So the Green Army, who were literally getting rounds down every day, fighting the Taliban on their doorstep with the FOBs and going out on patrols, we wouldn't do that. We would actually have specific targets that we would go for. Sometimes we'd be out nightly, sometimes it'd be a dry period.
Did you ever do joint operations with any type of American special operations?
Yeah, we did in Afghanistan. We do joint operations with the Americans, and obviously I was a JTAC as well. So the amount of American assets, we obviously being tier 1, we would never go on the ground without Spectre. Yeah. So which is your American asset as well, which is a godsend for us on the ground. Yeah.
Have you been through the American JTAC, or is it British specific?
We did the British one, but then to get combat ready, we used to fly out to the US. Yeah. We used to come over here, and as I said, you guys have, we have the luxury of going to some of these other places, but when it comes to especially the JTAC, we would come here. So I did for both deployments. I did one Spectre, one down in Fort Lauderdale, which was great. And then the next one, I was in a place called Cannon Air Force Base in the middle of New Mexico. I was like, this isn't Fort Lauderdale, doing them. And then we had your A-10s. Yeah. It was actually quite interesting. I remember getting combat ready in UK, we had a couple of American F-15s or something, and I'm calling in because what we do differently on our JTAC, we do low level as well. We do low, medium, and high level, and so the low level is worst case scenario. You don't have, you're literally looking line of sight. You fly the jet over your shoulder, and you need to call in it, talk him onto the target in a minute. But the terminology varies between the UK and the Americans. But this wasn't low level, this was medium level. And I'm like, this is the farm, gave him the description, and he's on the farm, and I'm like, the silo tower. The silo tower for us is like a tall tower. But apparently my instructor was like, no, for the Americans, the silo tower is like, looks long from the ground. I was like, oh, it's a barn, isn't it? So it's just getting used to some of those terminologies. Yeah. But we did a lot of cross training.
From an operational standpoint, can you say who you worked with on the American side?
It's DevGru guys. Yeah.
Would it normally be a situation where like they're doing the hit and you're a blocking force, or vice versa, or was it higher level than that?
It depended on what the mission was, but we also to elaborate as well. We used to always have a DevGru guy attached to us, and we would have one attached to the DevGru. We had the same with the Australian SAS. So we did a lot of cross training as well. So and that's why for certain scenarios where the units came together, we understood each other's TTPs. It made it a bit easier rather than going with these other guys and they don't understand. We'd take things from the Americans and they may steal a couple of things from us as well.
Yeah. Are there any details operationally that don't give away TTPs or locations that you can share about anything that you've done?
It's a good story actually. It was a hostage rescue in Somalia, and our pager went off. It literally wasn't long after the whole Captain Phillips incident, and we're on the black roll, and I remember going to work in the morning, and in the offices there's a lot of people walking around, and I'm like, what's going on? And like, I don't know, you can sense something's happening. And basically this elderly couple everyone had been warned, not to go to mainland Africa. They basically ignored that and sailed from Seychelles and going down to Tanzania and got picked up by pirates. So I remember going in the gym in the afternoon and the pager went off. So that perfect. Pager's gone off, got our kit, went to RAF Bryce Norton, loaded onto a C-17, which was actually bound for Iraq. And Afghanistan, and then it got diverted. We took that to Oman. So in Oman, we do our pre-deployment training. We have a great training facility there, and you can do the mobility, you can do the air and everything else, and very similar to the Afghan and the Iraq environment. And so we have a AC-130 there for the jumps, and so we're flying out to that. And then we've got the mission pack about this couple. This elderly couple. But one of the things that stood out for me, for us to do hostage rescue, we have to have a MERT team, which is basically these doctors, these surgeons. And these guys came to us and they're like, oh, we've never jumped static line squares. Yeah. And we're like, they've done their rounds. Yeah. And they're like, okay. So we ended up having to teach them mid-flight how to jump, how they'd be jumping out.
Yeah, that's nice.
And we go to Oman, we pick up the AC-130 and we all cross deck and then flying out over the Indian Ocean. And we had 2 sticks, there were 16 guys, and then he obviously had the 4 MERT guys. So stick 1 went out with the first 2 MERT guys. I was a team leader of stick 2, and I was the dive rep for the squadron because of my background. They're like, well, you're the dive rep. And so I had a big Avon bag with all these we had 4 rebreathers just in case we needed to use them. And so these 2 PGIs picked me up and they just put me to this tailgate. And I remember just looking out over the Indian Ocean. Normally, if we had a bit of time, we'd have our own ribs, and our coxswains would jump out with us because we can throw 2 24-foot ribs out the back of a Herc and go after it. But we didn't have, because of the timelines was critical, we didn't have that. So there was already a Royal Navy vessel in the Indian Ocean and they had their own coxswains who'd done ribs, but they'd never picked up parachutists before. So for us, when you're flying through the air, you want to get as close to that rib as possible and get in. So I'm jumping out at night and I'm flying, trying to fly towards these ribs, and they kept moving away because we were all worried because we weren't worried about anything, but it was the fact there was sharks off the coast of Somalia. So we wanted to get out, but we got picked up by these boats, boarded the vessel and headed. And Then we loaded up again, and then we were steaming towards the target area. And this was our Iranian embassy for the SBS. This is what we were going to be doing. And I remember they were actually cross-decking them onto a mothership, and we must have been about 1 nautic out. Now, they couldn't see us, but we could see them. And then all we got over the net was stop. And I thought, what? Ended up getting pulled back. Didn't really know the full picture, got boarded the vessel, but it turned out that the president of Somalia was in London with our Prime Minister, Gordon Brown. So for them, what they didn't want the next day is 30 dead pirates on the thing. So that ended up being a backlash for them because it got leaked to the press that we were there and we could have done the rescue. And then the pager went off again the following week, and it turned out to be the same people. Anyway, long story, but during this period, there was a young boy in Somalia. It's a great ending. And he came home upset. He'd been bullied in school, and his dad like, what's wrong? And a lot of kids have been bullying him because he's from Somalia, and there'd been a lot of hostage stuff. But his father was from this tribe that were actually holding this couple.
Oh, wow.
And unbeknown to a lot of people, about 18 months, over 18 months before they got released. UK are very adamant they won't pay for a hostage release. But the guy went over with a couple of £1 million from the Somali community in London and paid for them to release themselves.
Wow.
Yeah.
Man, that's wild.
Yeah.
That's incredible.
So for us, it's like, in reflection, I think it was a wrong decision, regardless of, they're worried about public perception. That's what it was. And obviously keeping those relationships with Somalia. But for us, it was like, everything flowed. We were good to go. It was our Iranian embassy.
Yeah. Wow. All right. So you did two black roll rotations. And you did multiple trips to Afghanistan. Did you do any to Iraq?
No. SAS were doing the Iraq
That's
ones.
right.
Yeah.
Did you do anything, like here in the United States, we'll call it stateside work. What would you call it in Britain?
Back in UK?
Yeah. If you did something in the UK operationally, it would be considered done at home, or like how would you reference it?
Yeah, so on our black rolls, we would be training a lot in the UK. We used to do a lot of cross training with the police. The guys would be attached to them, but yeah.
But what would you call doing, like I said, here we would call it stateside work?
Yeah.
What would you call it there?
I don't know nothing. No, yeah.
Just say here at home.
Yeah. Just here at home. Yeah, because for us, our remit was UK and abroad as well. Yeah. So
did you do any real world operations inside the UK?
Only training. No, thankfully I didn't need to do anything. Yeah.
Has your unit or have any of your guys done real world operations in the UK?
Yeah, there's been some incidents. There's been vessels taken down off the coast of UK. There was there's a few stuff at the Glasgow airport. There was a few things. Yeah.
And then the rest of the time it's all training or standby or
training or standby. Like I say, you go away, do all these courses, which is great, but then when you come around after that 2-year rule, you're probably out of date and you have to then get re-qualified. It was very difficult for you to even spend some time back at camp. I remember one year, 1 week. Sorry, that I was on a Friday and I'd just come back from somewhere and I was like, perfect. No, I was supposed to go on a course, and the course got cancelled on the Friday. I was like, perfect, there's nothing in for next week. I've got a week at camp, I can go see the dentist, sort out some admin and things like that. By the time the end of the day, the sergeant major had me on another course. They will fill your diary. And that's what as you know, it's quite a selfish role, being a family man. You're hardly home at all. So, it's difficult. Yeah. I mean, and like you said, if you're then on the black roll, sometimes you're on 30 minutes notice to move. You can't be left alone with your kids. Yeah. So even if you are home, you can't be alone with your kids as well.
Wow. That is tough. Ultimately, you ended up getting medically retired because of a bad parachuting accident.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, so we're back. We're in Oman doing pre-deployment training for another Afghan tour, and we'd had some new guys come through selection since we were last in Afghan, and so they had to get hey-ho trained. So they'd done their static line squares and we're doing hey-ho. And the sergeant major's like, well, you guys go, what do you call it? You could go do some fun jumps.
Yeah.
And I never believe, the military's great in taking the sport and ruining it. It's skiing, diving or parachuting. Yeah. So we're jumping, and it's about the third or fourth jump of the day. And normally I like to go at the front of the stick and then just frog it, just jump back and you know, and face back into the aircraft. And one of the team leaders, all right, Stott, you're in the middle of the stick. I was like, okay. So I ended up in the middle of the stick. And as I'm jumping out, you know, did my compulsory count. And then I'm looking, and I'm like, I'm looking the wrong way. I was looking up at my foot in the line and not looking out towards the rest of the team. And so I was frantically trying to clear my leg in time, because with the static line, you know, you've got a few seconds and that parachute's now going to open. And you know, I couldn't clear my leg in time. When the parachute did open, it pulled my leg back and to the right. And thankfully my heel did clear from the line and didn't come completely off. So straight away there was a pain I'd never felt before. And when you do hey-ho jump, you jump at 15,000 feet. So it's the limits of oxygen. You don't need to go on oxygen anything higher. And so the air is quite thin. And so I was vomiting because of the pain. So I've been sick all over myself. And I was also drifting in and out of consciousness. But when I was coming back to, I could see the guys. I was flying in the right direction. I mean, as I started descending, you know, the air's getting a bit better for me. I mean, I'm just flying through the air, and you know, I had comms with the guy, but there's no point in me telling him, because there's nothing we can do mid-air. So for me, I have to land this. So my first concern was about landing it correctly, because if I'd mistimed the landing, I could damage the good leg. And so you get to the NATO T in the desert, and I could see the guys and their approach, and I came and I landed one leg. It was a great landing, and just screamed out medic. And my mate who was next to me was like, that was a good landing. I said, the exit wasn't. And so the doc came over, told him what happened, and we went straight to the hospital. I had an MRI, and I tore my ACL, my MCL, my lateral meniscus in my knee, my hamstring, my calf, and my quadricep. So all the supporting muscles as well. Because normally, I know like rugby players can tear their ACL, but they have good muscle structure to support it. But that had all gone as well. But to add to the issue, to the pain, is it was the same time as the back in 2010. It was the same time as the Icelandic volcano eruption, which had grounded majority of the aircraft. So they couldn't get an Aeromed flight to me. So I was basically put in a hotel 4 weeks on painkillers and waited for the next flight, which is actually the critical time that you should be recovering. Got back to UK, went to the hospital. They said, right, go home for 6 weeks, come back. You know, came back 6 weeks later, by which time my unit of now, lads have gone, they're in Afghan. Came back, they lost my MRI scans, and it was just a whole spiral of errors, and it just started going downhill and downhill. Yeah.
Did you get surgery?
I got surgery in the end. But, you know, when I talked about my first selection, when I blew my knee out, I got surgery within 72 hours of that. I mean, within 6 weeks, I was back on the training team doing 30 milers on the Commando course. It took me 44 weeks to get surgery. You know, I actually almost threatened the MOD to get it done before I left. So, you know, I had a great time in the military, loved the military, and I've always promoted the military. But that last year wasn't, you know, that last period or few months wasn't great for me at all.
Yeah, that sucks. So they medically retired you?
Again, I got retired, but it wasn't on what I should have been getting. And it took me 5 years, and I won a tribunal hearing against the MOD. Yeah. Stuff you shouldn't be doing, really.
No, I agree. I mean, there's so many examples, similar examples, and you know, here with the American military of shit like that. So now all of a sudden you go from your identity as one of the most elite special operations soldiers in the world, to a medically retired civilian that doesn't have anything going on. How did you navigate that?
Yeah, at the time I didn't really, you know, my wife, you know, I met my wife not long before getting injured, actually. You know, she saw me at my best and then really saw me at my worst in a short period of time. She's very entrepreneurial. You know, the military is like your mother and your father. You know, that they'll clothe you, they feed you, they pay you on time, and they keep all those other distractions away from you so you can focus on your job. And so Alana was a bank manager at the time. And so those worries that I had about banking and where I get gas from and electric, you know, those things she picked up. But I was going through an identity crisis. You know, I've gone from, like you say, and having a role and a purpose to where do I now fit in society. And to sort of add to the pressure as well, Alana was now, you know, when I left, she was 8 months pregnant, you know, with our first child. And so I was worried, is there any work out there? Because I hadn't planned to leave. Is there going to be any work out there? How am I going to support the family? And, without sounding like Liam Neeson, with our particular skill sets, we tend to go into the security sector. But in the security sector, I did a little bit of research while I was waiting on my operation. And me and my wife, went away and I did a close protection course when I was in SF. But a friend of mine, he worked and he said, well, the biggest money is in corporate close protection. The security industry isn't risk reward ratio balanced. Yeah. You could be in Afghan and Iraq, on 50% of the money the guys are on in 5-star hotels or on super yachts. So I was like, well, I'll follow the money. So I went and did a corporate CP course with Alana. She did surveillance courses as well. And then, when I got out, a lot, the anti-piracy thing was still at its height. And a few of my friends from the SBS had their own companies. I didn't want to be competing with them. I didn't want to go Afghan and Iraq. So focus on that corporate bit. My first job within 48 hours is helping set up the British Embassy in Benghazi during the Arab Spring. So this is May 2011 now. So as soon as I got there, boots on the ground, representing this company, soon identified that the Libyans didn't want it to be another Afghanistan and Iraq. Gaddafi was still alive at this point. He's in Tripoli, the city surrounded. So once Gaddafi had fallen, they wanted to take control of the country. Didn't want private security companies walking around with weapons. But then I'm sat in this hotel, and there's NGOs there, there's oil and gas, and there's some of the biggest private security companies out there. I always call them the Big Five. And I was listening to some of their directors and managers winning these bids and then over-promising crisis management and evacuation plans, which weren't actually in place. I was like, that's not in place, So I flew back from that trip. Alana gave birth to Molly, and I said, look, I've got a plan. So there's a huge proliferation of weapons at this time because it's, it was still accessible before Gaddafi had fallen. So I went back in and I bought 30 weapons on the black market and I buried them between Tunis and Egypt and designed my own evacuation plans, put some comms kit in there, put money in there and just left them and just obviously spent a month just burying them in the desert. We lived in Aberdeen, which is like the oil and gas capital of Europe. It's like the Houston of Europe. So we had access, my wife's from Aberdeen, we had access to some of the oil subsidiary companies. And so I was selling this concept to them, and some of them were giving it as a retainer. Hopefully never needed to use it. But each phone call I was getting was a different task. It was a different country. And so I was learning a lot about the security industry. I sort of joke when you tell people you're in the security industry and you look like the way you are, they think you're a doorman from the local nightclub. And it's like, well, no, the security industry is very, very diverse. You have surveillance, close protection, coaching, mentoring, maritime, cyber. It's a big old beast. And so for me, I was learning so much about the security in a short period of time. Each phone call was different. One, I was training the Kurdish Special Forces to fight ISIS. The next one, I'm taking the UAE Royal Family super yacht from Barcelona to the Maldives. Then London Olympics, the Brazil Soccer World Cup. There was all these different areas. But I just finished the London Olympics, 6 weeks in London, which was great. And I tended to find that every time I had a good task, I ended up having a bad task. And I was in Benghazi, September 11th, 2012, and I see, obviously, Ty's bracelet on there. So I get a phone call, and there's a German oil company called KCA Deutag who were there. And at this point, it was on the evening of September 11th. No one knew what was going on. And they're like, Dean, can you get this oil company from Benghazi back to Tripoli? I said, yeah. So I turned up, picked up these eight German engineers. And what I did is I had a safe house in Zella. So rather than going straight from Benghazi to Tripoli, which is the coastal road, what people don't understand, in Libya, I have like 167 tribes. And so I can't take drivers from Benghazi to Tripoli. You've got to go through Misrata and Tripoli, and that will cause issues in itself. And so I had a safe house in Zella. We drove them out to Zella. It's about 5 miles southwest of Benghazi, safe enough out there. And we just stayed there for 36 hours, by which time we could see everything unfolding on the news. Now realize actually what had happened, because at that point we didn't know what was going on. But during that period, I had drivers coming in from Tripoli, but I couldn't tell the drivers from Benghazi because they would just leave. And I remember the morning that the drivers arrived, it was like the OK Corral. The Benghazis had their pistols out, the people from Tripoli, and they were arguing. And I said, look, and I sat them down. I said, look, I cannot take you to Tripoli. That's going to be an issue, and you don't want to come either. And they're like, no. I said, so these drivers are going to take us. They were worried about whether they were going to get their money. So I paid them. Them guys went, and then we went to Tripoli. So that was a success.
How did you line up a safe house there?
So when I was doing the caches, I identified safe houses in different areas, and that's pretty much where my caches are. So the caches are next to safe houses. So again, with Tripoli, with Libya, you've got so many tribes and so many different people. So I have a number of fixers. So a fixer is someone who's a local who can get you stuff that you need. And so my fixer, for example, in Tripoli, his cousin was the president of the GNC, which is the new government, and he's from the West, but I couldn't use him in Benghazi. So I had equivalents in different areas. And so they would identify safe houses for me that we could use and be able to utilize up to 72 hours. So when you're doing evacuations, if there's an issue, you have safe house options along the route.
But how are you identifying who your fixers are? Like, how are you identifying a safe house? Is it something where you're renting it for a month, or logistically, how are you pulling that off?
Yeah, so identifying the fixers is quite difficult. There has to be an element of trust. You can't, for me, with some of these countries that I go into, I literally go on. I sometimes work on my own, and I just work on personal skills. And so you have to put an element of trust into these people. And for them, actually, believe it or not, the safe houses are just normal people's houses. So they didn't really want retainers. They just wanted to know, we'll talk about some of the other evacuations. Everyone's quite quick to tarnish certain communities with one brush because certain incidents, for example, like 9/11 with the Muslim community. But a lot of the most hospitable people I've seen, they don't like terrorists, and so they just want to help you. So there's a couple of countries where I've had to pay retainers, just because strategically they're places that we want. But most of them were just doing it pro bono.
And if you are doing a retainer, what kind of money is that?
For them, obviously I'm getting retainers from the oil company. So it could be like $1,000 a month, which is huge. Yeah. For them.
Yeah. Okay.
But that's also to make sure that there's food and water in place and,
right.
and things like that. And then we have drivers as well.
Wow. All right, so you get them out, no problem, no issues along the way. No
issues along the way. Like I said, I think other companies may have just taken that coastal road and panicked, and so for us it was a bit longer, but it was the right decision. I always joke that when people speak about special forces, Hollywood doesn't help matters. Dwayne Johnson and Jason Statham. It's all about the offensive action. I call it the biceps, the bullets, and the bombs. Yeah. But that's 25% of what we do in SF. But 50% of what we do is hearts and minds, support and influence. And so that's what I've really targeted on here is understanding the demographics, the politics, and the tribal influences of the countries that I go into. And so when I go in initially, I sit down, meet fixers, and really get them to explain to me the history of the country, the issues when it comes to tribals and stuff like that, and get a real understanding of the country myself and understanding the atmospherics. I remember going to Somalia once and flew in on my own, and I ended up meeting this gentleman. So everyone was at the airbase, and I just walked out the airport, went to the nearest hotel, which was called the Peace Hotel, and ended up meeting a gentleman who we ended up doing business with, and he's actually from London. But I sat down with him and his family, and he said, look, I get emails all the time from security companies all around the world wanting to do business, but you've come here, you've taken the risk. You understand, I call it the media monster. The media monster doesn't help the matter with some of these places. But understand that, yes, they're not naive to think there's not places of risk. It's like anywhere, but it's not as bad as the world's making out. So that's what I do. I sort of build those relationships and try and learn as much about the country as possible. And that helps me with my planning as well.
Yeah. Man, that's fascinating. That's a lot going on to organize yourself. You also did the evacuation of a Canadian embassy where you rescued 4 diplomats and 18 military personnel. Can you talk about that?
So that was 2 years later. So I'm now, again, at another sporting event. I'm in Brazil covering the Soccer World Cup.
Covering it how?
So the client we were working for was Visa. Visa, one of the main sponsors. So they would have some of their board members coming in, and again, it's the 5-star hotels, it's the tickets for all the events, and literally these big sporting events, they have security, they have the police in place as well. But should there be an issue, they almost need a go-to to look for. So we would actually, a lot of them didn't even realize we were were security, we would just be blended in with them and sat with them. But should there be an incident, that we can then direct them and take them.
Are you carrying weapons or no?
No, we're not carrying weapons on that. We also, in Brazil, we had ex-military and law enforcement with us, and they were carrying.
Yeah. Okay.
But I think between the 6 weeks in London and the 3 weeks I ended up doing in Brazil, I ended up just giving out two paracetamol. That was it. That was the extent of what I was needed. But you're almost there as a layer should there be an issue, which is it's a great gig.
Yeah.
So whilst this was going on, we had the Tripoli War in Libya, which was a civil war between the militias and the government. And so with the Canadian embassy, all the other embassies had shut down their shutters and just went to the border as soon as they realized there was an issue. The year prior, the Canadian embassy did a review, and they soon realized that it's costing them $20 million a year to be in Libya. All these embassies are there for like trade and investment, looking at opportunities for Canada, opportunities for US, for the UK. And they realize it's going to be another 15 years before Libya sorts themselves out. So they're like, well,
fuck this.
We're off. So, but they couldn't just shut shop and go right in the middle of peacetime, because the questions would be asked. So they needed a window of opportunity to do it. So whereas the other embassies shut shop and disappeared, they stayed because they had to shred down, collapse their offices and everything else. They had their own CP team, who was made up of some Canadian military and reservists. And with these guys, they would rotate every 4 months. They would fly in and out of Tripoli International Airport and then do that. They used to stay in a place called Palm City, which is all their accommodation, where a few of the oil and gas people, it's like a resort on the Tripoli coastline. There's a lot of oil and gas there, a lot of the embassies. And then their offices were in the city. So really, they only ever worked within the city walls. They'd never, I don't want to throw them on the bus, none of them had foresight to actually do any recce's out of the city. Yeah. And so I then get a phone call saying, all the other embassies are gone, this securities company's gone, no one's coming back, your name keeps coming up. So I flew back in, I flew into Libya, met them at to Palm City, and I sat down with their CP team, because I'd done the coastal route so many times. It's actually only 100 kilometers from Tripoli to the Tunis border. And Zawara, which is on the border, is where my fixer was from. So he knew everyone along that way. So the Canadians were happy that I would help them, escort them and guide them out of the country. The issue they had, or concern they had, is the week before the British embassy got shot at every checkpoint between Tripoli and Tunis. But the reason for that, so again, another issue that the security issue, all the embassy vehicles in Libya had red number plates, which indicated it was embassy. And then they had like a certain number in the corner which dictated which embassy it was from. But the Brits just decided to drive through the checkpoints and not stop. They sort of panicked. So the locals were just shooting them, which obviously concerned by the time that information got back to Canadians, they're now panicking. Yeah. So myself and my fixer, we went out to the checkpoints. And rather than speaking to the guys who were at the checkpoint with the guns, we spoke to the tribal elders. We sat down with them, had coffee, had lunch, and actually it was all about showing them respect, communication, being fully transparent. This is who we are, this is what we're doing, this is the time we intend to do it. Yeah, we palm their hands with a few $100s, which is fine. So then when we were coming into those areas, they would come in and escort us through. Oh, wow. Yeah, so really, it sounds very sexy in Hollywood. It wasn't. It was just really... Just logistics. Yeah. And so their convoy... The Canadians, their CP guy, Chad, was in their lead vehicle. And then me and my fixer were in another vehicle. The issue they had with their vehicles, they could only put so much equipment in it. And so they had a lot of other specialist equipment they couldn't get. So what we did is I hired 2 fish wagons. So the fish wagons used to take fish each day from Tripoli to Tunis. So they're always going through that border. So that the border guys know who they are. And we actually just loaded it with a military kit and they just went straight through, no issue, yeah. And so all I would do is, I would be probably a couple of miles ahead of their convoy, get to the checkpoints and then just obviously speak to the guys and then just call them through. So yeah, it was literally just bouncing them through to the end.
Yeah, that's wild. I do have a Patreon question from Hunter Baxter. I want to know what's running through your mind while evacuating people in Libya.
Yeah, so for me, I try not to. Best things to have a plan in place. But the success of what we do is being reactive to situation changes. Actually that plan went quite well. The issue we had was the morning that we decided we were going to do it. We were supposed to leave at like first light, and we ended up leaving about 2 or 3 hours later because I didn't realize that the alcohol that belongs to the embassy belongs to the Queen. And so we had to find someone to sign that over to.
Jeez.
So I'm like, oh my God,
that's what you're worried about.
Yeah, so that's what you're worried about. So, there's little things like that which catch you out by surprise. So we ended up, delaying our move. And I remember I remember being ahead, and I was just outside Zawara waiting on the convoy coming, and they were slow. I'm like, what's going on? And I had comms with Chad. He's like, oh yeah, we're held up. But one of the senior NCOs decided he wanted to drive the vehicle and ended up having a road traffic collision with one of the locals.
Oh, wow.
But what they did is the Canadians, they panicked and came running to the border. So by the time they came to me just at the border, I then had them to get through, and then I had this disgruntled Libyan as well. So yeah, just dealing with those sort of things. Things that are out of your control. When you're planning these things, you go through all the potential actions on and what you would do. But there's things I couldn't factor alcohol for the Queen Queen or a road traffic collision.
No doubt. Fast forward to the Afghanistan withdrawal. It says that you assisted getting about 1,200 people out of there. British citizens or what?
Britain, people from all nationalities. Really interesting, that one. The difference between the Afghan and like the Libya one, I was physically on the ground doing it. When the Afghan pullout happened, actually a friend of mine's wife, she used to be in the military and work for the UN, and she knew of a woman who was a big female spokesperson for Afghan. She built the first Afghan underground schools for girls.
Oh wow!
And then obviously when the Allied forces came in, it was then exposed. So she was at threat from the Taliban, but she was in the Times 100 most influential people. There's photos with her Condoleezza Rice and the Americans wouldn't help her.
Wow.
And so they'd exhausted all options. So she messaged me and said, "Look, Dean, I know you do evacuations. Do you have anything on the ground?" So I was working with another organization who had a medical facility in Afghanistan, and it had it there for the last 10 years. So they had great connectivity on the ground. And so we were working with the teams on the ground, the locals. Actually, we're also working with the Taliban as well, believe it or not, because people are like, why are you working with the Taliban? The Taliban didn't want there to be an incident during this pullout. Obviously it was ISIS-K that had the big explosion. So we were working with that. So we're with the likes of Libya and Afghan, sort of put some context to the people out there. A lot of these big corporations, oil and gas, NGOs, they'll sign a crisis management insurance piece with one of the insurance companies, and they tend to all rub shoulders together, But what they don't realize is in the fine print, in the terms and conditions, they're responsible, the insurance company, for getting an aircraft into that airfield to get you out. They're not responsible for getting you to that airfield.
Yeah.
And so I call it the first mile, and that's what I focus on, is because once you're at the airfield, it's fine. You can get them on the plane. Yeah. It's getting them from A to B. And so there was, you had the Abbey Gate. There was a hotel near there where, the Brits and Americans were sending people to wait until they, but obviously it was a huge target. So we had safe houses that we could house people. And so we started off with this woman, and she ended up getting another 14 girls out. And before I know it, we had some 60 plus WhatsApp messages. And so it was great to see humanity, that people wanted to help. There was a lot of veterans who wanted to help, Terps that they used to work with. And then there was, I had everything from the British Boxing Association telling me that the Afghan boxing team were at risk. And, it wasn't the Real Housewives of Orange County, but it's an example. The Real Housewives of Orange County who wanted to help and put money together. But what people didn't really understand was the nuances of evacuations. And so there was incidents of people getting people out without passports or getting them across the border. So for us, it was almost like a paper exercise.
Yeah.
We had to make sure that these people had a host country to go to. They had the right paperwork in place. It was quite difficult because we're having to say no to a lot of people. But I'm glad that we stuck to that protocol, because there are organizations now being investigated for human trafficking because they did get people out without the correct paperwork as well. Yeah. And so for us, it started off with one, and then they ended up just being in all these WhatsApp groups and just helping people. And you know, some of the biggest corporations out there, you know, one of the security companies, I won't name them, but they then realized that actually they weren't even insured for Afghanistan until they put the balloon up. So so me and my wife gets involved. She deals with the chartered stuff, does a lot of the logistics behind the scene, but she gets very emotionally involved. You know, there's an incident where a young boy was ill and stuff. Whereas I try not to, when I'm doing these tasks, whether on the ground or at home, I try not to get emotionally attached, because I don't want it to then blur a decision. You know, when I'm on the ground. So it started off helping one person, and by the end we sort of helped coordinate over 1,200 people getting out. Yeah,
that's amazing. Fast forward even further, October 7th, the Hamas attack in Israel, you end up springing into action again and getting over 200 people out, including 14 American students from the Bible College in Jerusalem.
Yeah, that's it. So October the 7th, me and my wife were actually in Disneyland.
Oh, wow.
A friend of ours had introduced it. They're members of this Club 33, which is like a private members club in Disneyland. So my kids will be distraught. But me and my wife went on our own with them. And obviously October the 7th for the Hamas incident was unfolding. So it wasn't long we were there, and the phone was starting to go off. You know, sort of looking at the phone and things like that. The next morning, I get a message from a friend of mine, a close friend, who his auntie and uncle, they're Sri Lankan. They were on a holiday in Bethlehem on his tour, and the tour guide was like, "Oh no, it's safe," you know. So he was obviously worried. And my wife's then looking at the TV, and she said, "I've just bought you a ticket." I was like, "Sorry," you know. She said, "I've just bought you a ticket." I think, you know, sort of looking back, potentially what could happen. You know, we didn't know how long the airspace was going to be open. And, you know, we need to get in there. The difference between Israel compared to likes of Afghan and Libya, I'd never been to Israel before. Yeah. And so for me, this was a country I'd not been to. So, but I understood about doing evacuations and stuff like that. I'd not long finished filming in Jordan on the Netflix show. So Jordan was a neighboring country to Israel. And we knew everyone from the fixers, the drivers, the colonels in the special forces, all the way up to King Abdullah. So I knew I had that assets there if we needed. So my wife bought me a ticket. It was with Turkish Airlines, and there was a flight going late on that afternoon. So she's driving me to LAX. On the way, as soon as I get there, Turkish Airlines have cancelled their flight. Now the Americans have cancelled all their flight, all the American airlines. So as we're heading back towards Orange County, my wife's online, and she's like, "Look, there's a flight El Al, which is an Israeli airline. They've now opened up flights. They're opening up more flights to get Israelis back." So we did a U-turn, went back to LAX, and so I have a ticket, and I'm stood in this queue with my wife, and these two gentlemen, obviously Israeli intelligence, they were questioning people that were getting on the flight, and he says to me, looks at me, and I was pretty much similar dressed to this, 5'11" boots, jeans, looked like a private military contractor. And he said, "So who are you going to see?" And I said, "Oh, I don't know." And he said, "Okay, so do you have a letter?" I said, "No, I don't have a letter." So he's like looking at me. He goes, "So what do you do?" I said, "Oh, we're a security company." He's like, "Perfect. Do you have a website?" I said, "No, we don't have a website." So we never needed a website. So literally this guy's looking at me like, this guy's full of shit. And actually I was being fully transparent with him. I said, "No." And then, he Googled me and we chatted, and he said, "Okay." So that was the hardest thing, getting on the flight. And so I said goodbye to Lana, boarded the flight, and he actually pulled me aside just before I boarded the plane and wished me luck. His friend actually before was like that. When he went off, he said, "You in MI6?" I said, "Look at me, I don't look like MI6. Yeah. I'm not nothing at all." So we flew there, and then a sort of broke protocol. We didn't normally, with likes of Libya and Afghanistan, I had safe houses in place. I had drivers, I had security guys. I was going in blind. I had a couple of security guys I'd worked with before from Israel. So I messaged them, and they were going to be there to pick me up. And so Alana was definitely was messaging a few people we knew from the Jewish community in London and in New York and LA. And then obviously the word got round. I landed 13 hours later, got into Tel Aviv. And Alana already had 69 families that needed assistance. So I got picked up by the guys and we went straight to Jerusalem. So unbeknown to me, again, coming in hot, it was the Sukkot holiday. So from America alone, there was 10,000 families from Boston and New York alone in Israel at the time. But Tel Aviv looked peaceful. Jerusalem was beautiful. All the issues now are in Gaza. So there was people sort of scattered over who were dealing with scattered all over Israel. So we sort of coordinated getting them into the central belt between Tel Aviv and Jerusalem. And so from a security aspect, the difficulty was there was flights that were getting cancelled a lot. And so Alana was dealing with chartered aircraft, trying to get people on. And when these flights were getting cancelled, others were coming, but you needed to make the decision there and then. And, some people were helping were like elderly couples in their 70s. And so they don't know how you work technology. So Alana's having to book them flights. I had the border to Jordan was open, but it was only open about 3 or 4 hours a day. So the non-Jewish community, and also we did help some Jewish who were happy to go out. We were getting people across the King Abdullah Bridge, and then the fixers we used for Netflix were taking them to Amman.
Oh, wow.
So we had the road option there, and then obviously the air options when they were available. So at this point, Gaza now was, they made a buffer zone between Gaza and ended up pushing out about 5 kilometers, I think. And the issue was that if Hezbollah was going to get involved, because at the moment you could still fly in from Tel Aviv from north, but if Hezbollah was going to get involved, that would close the airspace. And so the panic was get as many people out before that happened. So then we were looking at other options as well from the sea to go to Cyprus. So while I was on the ground, and especially the first 4 days, hardly slept, because by the time Alana was giving me my list for the day and I was getting people out, by the time the end of the day with me, New York and LA were waking up, and it was like the next wave. But breaking protocol, normally I had clients to go in. I knew who I was getting. We had safe houses in place. We were trying to help as many people in a short period of time. And so I did a couple of videos, and I shared it with likes of Jocko, Jack Carr, Sean Ryan. And there's a woman called Elizabeth, and her husband was a pastor of a Bible college in Jerusalem, in the old city. They're actually from Huntington Beach, which was literally from my house is 30 minutes. Yeah. And they had 15 students, 14 American and 1 Indian. And they were under a lot of pressure from the families, because I call it the media monster. And the media monster was portraying this war, but it hadn't even started yet. And all the flights had got cancelled. They'd exhausted all their options, and she was generally upset. So she said that she prayed that morning. She goes, I wonder what Jocko would do. And she turned on her phone, and then there I am on Jocko's story saying, here I am in the old city of Jerusalem. And so she messaged me, and 45 minutes later I walk into, it's the oldest Protestant church in the world in the old city of Jerusalem. And I sit down with her and Matthew, and the students are there, and then I said, right, yeah, we'll help you. And then about 48 hours, no, a bit longer than that, Anna managed to get them all out on a flight at no cost for any of them. Yeah. Wow. So yeah, it was. Cool. So I saw the pros and cons of social media. I broke protocol. I wouldn't normally do that. But yeah, I was getting messages from people. I hope you're not getting these people. I hope you're not getting. No, for us, I did a TV interview, and the irony where I did this TV interview was the most holiest place in the world. And I said, look, I'm not a religious person. I believe in a bigger power, but I believe in good and bad. And I'll always help the good people. And so once that first week was over, everyone who wanted to leave had left now. There was enough flights there. Everyone was leaving. And a lot of people wanted to stay. The biggest issue we had was when we're dealing with certain people, they were happy to stay. Yeah. But their son and daughter in New York or Boston or London's panicking. I said, well, you need to speak to your son, because so it's trying to manage those. But we then, after that first week, then put other safe houses in place. I had infrastructure, and then for me, I always have to remain impartial. I then flew out, left a team of local Israeli guys who can coordinate that, because I didn't know what was going to happen next. Should Hezbollah then get involved in this, my next trip may be Lebanon. Yeah,
wow. Yeah. Some dicey times, no doubt. There's an excerpt from part of the book that talks about being in Yemen, head to toe in traditional garb. You're normally rocking brown contacts, but you forgot to put them in, and then you're compromised. You reach under your seat to grab a weapon. Can you tell that story?
Yeah, so it was actually Afghanistan. So to get the book approved, we had to SF. We're like, you can't tell people we dress up as locals. Everyone knows it. So we sort of changed it for the book, but it was actually Afghanistan. So when I was there, one of my roles is to pick up Taliban agents and drop them off to MI6 for debriefing. And so we would go out in the days that we would go out and pick them up. And it's 3 vehicles that we go in. We have a lead vehicle, a second vehicle picks them up, and the third vehicle makes sure there's no follow-up or anti-surveillance. And there's no point in planning a route in Kandahar, because every time you go into Kandahar, different roadblocks and things like that. So we knew where the target was. So this day, so you have the 3 Brit SF guys in each vehicle, and then they have a Afghan SF guy with them as well, doing the terps and interpreting. And I'm the lead vehicle, and so I get to a roadblock, and the guy's pointing me to the right, go right, and I'm down this very narrow market street, the shops either side, and it's bumper to bumper with traffic. And straight away, people are paying attention to the vehicle. They're pointing at the vehicle. Some people are knocking on the window, and I'm like, oh my God. So I think we've been compromised. So for me, I had my beard was dyed black. I had the makeup and they make the brown skin, full turban, look like a local. But I can't put anything in my eyes. I don't like anything in my eyes. So I could never get my contact lenses in. So I had piercing blue eyes, and with a black beard and this brown skin. So my senses are heightened because I know that I shouldn't be there, if that makes sense. And so I said, the heck no. I said, I think we've been compromised. Yeah, I think we have. And so over the net, they can hear this in our earpiece. And so my commander back the ops officer back in Kandahar and CAF Air Base, he's asking me questions. He's like, are you happy with the IA drill? So the IA drill is I grab underneath my seat, I have an MP5 Kurtz. So it's a broken down MP5, barrel. And then you basically empty, it's all loaded, made ready. You put 30 rounds into the windscreen on automatic, and it gives you enough time to grab your weapon, run to the back of the vehicle where there's it's like an RPG, a light anti-tank weapon, and then you blow up the vehicle because you don't want the specialist equipment and the comms kit being in the wrong hands. So this is going on in my head. I'm thinking I'm going to be in an orange boiler suit on CNN tonight. Yeah. So all things are going through your mind. So as he's chatting away, we're doing that. We're slowly moving forward with the vehicle, with the traffic, just trying to blend in. And again, people are knocking and pointing at the vehicle. So, the great thing about, our SF is, your commander who's in another place, that responsibility is on you. He can't say yay or nay, because he's not in that seat that you're in. And so he said, on you. I was like, okay. So as I grabbed the MP5, I then just pull it up. As I do that, the second vehicle's come round the corner, and my friend's like, stop. So straight away, you hear that. I just drop the weapon. He said, your turban's caught in the door. And so for me, I totally misread this situation. I knew I shouldn't be there. I know my senses are heightened, and I think everyone's bad. But actually, it was a real eye-opening lesson to me about how there are good people out there just caught up in bad places. Wow. And so I always say to people, when you run into a situation, it's just pause. I'm not saying pause for 5 minutes, but just pause 2 or 3 seconds and really take in actually what's going on, because mine was very much tunnel vision.
Yeah, man, that's crazy. It could have gone sideways quick for all the wrong reasons.
All the wrong reasons, yeah.
Thanks for sharing that story. The 14,000 mile PanAm bike ride, what spawned that?
So after the Canadian Embassy, I came back from that trip, and my normal SOP is I would launder my clothes, charge my phone, and get ready for the next mission. And my wife's, she's running stuff as well. She also had a property development business, and it wasn't unusual for sometimes me to fly back and my wife literally bring another bag to the airport, and then I go off. And so we sat down that evening, and I realized I'd actually only been home 21 days in a 365-day calendar. This is 5 years after leaving the SF community. And as soon as I realized that I was trying to match the adrenaline rush that I was in the SF without coming to terms with the fact that I'd left. I didn't, I was doing these high-risk missions, and they were being successful, but should they fail, I didn't have a Sabre squadron coming to get me. It was on my own back. And so actually I disconnected from society. What I thought was normal wasn't normal. And so my dad died that year as well. I literally buried him, and I was on a flight that evening. I'd just gone, And so my wife and I had 2 bottles of wine and a bottle of port, and then really started opening up and realized it was actually poor communication between us. She thought I wanted to be away, and I thought she wanted me to be away because does everything with the money. I thought she's running the business, and that really realized actually we didn't really want. Neither of us wanted me to go away. So she's like, look, you don't need to go away. You don't need the money. She has great property development business. Take a sabbatical. So that's what I did. My injured leg now was 2 kilos lighter than my good leg because of the muscle wastage. So this 5-year period, I had a TRX I used to throw in a hotel room, but never did any cardiovascular stuff. So I just bought a road bike off Amazon and cycled to and from the office, but 8 miles there, 8 miles back. But being physically active, I felt like there was a whole weight off my shoulders. It felt like, it was nice to get the lungs going again, lungs burning. But you can imagine with my backstory so far, and I'm sat in these architects and planners meetings, we had our second child now, my son Tommy, and I'm just feeding him with a bottle while Alana's like dealing with all these guys and girls on these properties. And she could see that glaze in my eyes and said, look, you need to do something, keep yourself physically, mentally engaged. So during this whole period of 5 years of leaving, we were also doing a lot in the veteran mental health space. Alana and I were SBS Association ambassadors for Scotland, fundraising for the SBS and doing stuff like that. And on my JTAC course, I was fortunate to meet Prince Harry. Him and I were partnered off together. And so him and I had done a lot of stuff in the philanthropy area together as well. I had an intelligence fusion cell based in Mozambique and Tanzania, which would identify the smuggling routes for the ivory from Africa to Asia. So I used to always go up to the palace and sort of disseminate that information to him.
What do you think of Harry?
Yeah, I think he's good. He obviously gets absolutely smashed by the media, especially in the UK. Not so much here in the US, but I think what people fail to realise is this guy's done 2 tours of Afghanistan. He's been boots on the ground, and he's obviously been the eye in the sky as well. So he's had it quite brutal. But I met him in 2007, so I met him before I even met my wife in 2009, and before he met him. So I've known him since he was 23 as a young single officer, and then I've seen him now to be he's 40 years old this year. He's a father of 2. So I've seen those changes. But for me, the best times were in the military for him, purely because he wasn't being judged on being a prince or whatever he did. He could make mistakes in the military, and it's just all part. And it was actually a very good JTAC, very confident on the net as well. So I didn't see any preferential treatment to him on the courses.
Well, I don't know shit about anything, but seeing the downturn or the downward spiral, if you will, of that whole family breakup and scenario and whatever, it seems kind of baffling. The only thing that I can take away from it, if you take a step back, is like, man, that must be some really good pussy. I don't know how else you explain all of that.
True.
I don't know.
I know he always wanted to, when his brother and Kate had their kids, you saw him before in likes of Africa. He loved the children in Africa. Yeah. That's where he was at his happiest place. When he left the military, was doing that stuff in Africa. I think with his wife, with Megan, she's also loves doing the philanthropy side and was doing that stuff. And so that probably brought them together. But I know he always wanted to be a father. Once his brother had done that, he wanted a family. So he has that. For me, it was a big shock. We're very fortunate. We went to the royal wedding back in 2018 and go into the wedding and see the people in the streets. The last time I saw something like that was like the London Olympics. Everyone was out. It was amazing. So then the speed, the downward spiral was crazy. Yeah. But so I said to Alana, she see that glaze in my eyes, and I said, well, I've always fancied doing a world record. And she said, well, what in? And I said, well, cycling seems to be good and it's not hurting my knee. And so I'd only cycled about 20 miles. And then Alana was looking through the Guinness Book of Records. She goes, well, what about this one? And it was the Pan American Hike. It was the world's longest road from southern Argentina to northern Alaska, about 22,000 kilometers, 14,000 miles. I was sort of looked at her. She clearly wanted me out of the house. I was like, okay. So having only cycled 20 miles, I applied for the world record. The world record at the time was 126 days when I applied for it. 6 weeks later, Guinness came back and said, because you actually got to do a pitch. It's not automatic that you get approved for it. You got to actually give them a full-on pitch. The world record had already been beaten by a Mexican guy, and he'd now done it in 118 days. I was like, so I'd already lost 8 days. So when they came back and said, yes, you've been successful, I rang Harry and I said, look, I'm going to do this bike ride. What charity do you think we should do it for? And him and his brother and Kate were just about to launch a campaign called Heads Together, which is a mental health campaign with 11 charities beneath it. And it ranged from postnatal depression, young children, teenagers, to veterans. And so I'd seen firsthand mental health in the military, but I wasn't aware how big it was in society. So that was the campaign that we did it for. We set a target of £1 million. Alana and I planned the whole project. She was more like the campaign director. She got me £500,000 sponsorship as a non-cyclist.
Your wife seems like a total badass, like a pipe hitter. Like she just runs shit, huh? Yeah,
she is. Interesting enough, going back to the identity crisis, I made a few errors when I left the military. I was trying to find that team with the same ethos and the same drive, and I was working with other people and they would let me down and things like that, and then soon realized actually it was beneath my nose. The person who had probably more drive was her as well. So so it's quite a unique partnership. But she's very comfortable. She has a business book called How to Ask for Money. The great thing about, as I mentioned earlier, when the military sort of handed me over, she picked up that responsibility. I still don't deal with contracts or talk money with clients. She does all that for me. And the reason the best way to explain it for people who don't understand, coming from the military background, I joined at the age of 17 and left at 33. So when you're planning operations in like Afghanistan, and you need I need 2 CH-47s, I need Spectre, UAV, squadron of guys, no one tells you the bottom line how much that costs. It's automatically done for you.
Yeah.
So you come from an environment like that to the corporate world where it's NDAs, proposals, and RFI, and that. I don't understand any of this. So she sort of takes that from me. So that's worked really well in our relationship, is understanding the strengths and the weakness. Yeah. I'm the extrovert, she's the introvert, and things like that. So yeah, she got me £500,000 sponsorship, set a target of £1 million. The world record was 117 days. And then, I set off a year, 15 months later on the 1st of February. So
what's the average mileage per day that you had to accomplish to break the world record?
So it changed from the beginning to the end. I talk about having a good plan, having a plan in place. So when I was planning this, it was almost like a military operation. I'd never cycled before, but I just put a military set of orders on it. I just crossed out ammunition. And then as I evolved as a cyclist during training, I implemented that into the plan. But when you're going through 14 countries, each country is slightly different. I had a support team and a documentary team with me who were more risk averse than myself. So I had to think about their welfare. And so really it was, what's the best time of the year is going to give you the advantage? Are you going through any countries, any potential political unrest? There's going to be issues. After going through Nicaragua, 4 weeks after cycling through Nicaragua, there was a coup.
Yeah.
I missed that. But I spoke to the previous, I was reading a lot of books and I was getting a lot of information, I was starting to put a plan together, but I wasn't getting that crucial bit of information. So we have a thing in SF called the hot debrief, or it's like the wash up. When you come in, what worked, what didn't work, and if we can do that again, what would we do differently? 3 simple questions. And so I reached out to the previous record holders, and there was a guy, the Mexican guy, there was a guy, Scott Napier, who did it 126 days. The 2 gentlemen called Axel and Andreas, who had the South America world record as a pair. And then there was a guy called Mark Beaumont, who's a famous cyclist, did round the world in 80 days. He'd done it. And so I asked them the same questions. They all started in Alaska and finished in Argentina. But all their issues are in South and Central America, bureaucracy, languages, spares for the bike. So being a military guy, I was like, well, why not get those issues out the way early and then do that?
Just hammer it the whole way home.
Then hammer it on the way home. So that's what I did. I started. One of the things I was proud of, just because they did it that way didn't mean it was the right way. So I started in the South and headed north. So they were the sort of things I was having to factor. The best time of the year, Southern Hemisphere, in winter.
Yeah.
So all these things. And so on like I said, 117 days, I was aiming for 110 days. It wasn't because I wanted to beat it by a week. We have a thing in the military called fudge. Should there be situations out of your control, it eats into that. So I gave myself that week fudge. So I was aiming for 110 days. The first week was just all wins, just solid wins. And I was hitting my targets, just about hitting my targets. By the end of the first week, I was 39 miles behind target. but my target was still a week ahead of the world record.
Oh, wow.
And from that point on, the winds were in my favor, everything was in my favor, and I was just gaining and gaining. I took, it wasn't without issues. I had food poisoning in Peru, I crashed my bike, got knocked off my bike in Colombia, but I got into Cartagena, and day 47, I took 10 days off the South America world record.
Wow.
So that was perfect. But again, the decision to go from north to south was a good decision from a cycling perspective. I had a whole tailwind through Peru. That's 2,500 kilometers of tailwind. But logistics wise, we're having to swap vehicles in every country, which was slowing us down. So our sponsors had bought an RV and a 4x4 in Fort Lauderdale, and was supposed to get shipped to Panama. And Alana rang me when I was in Ecuador, and she said that the vehicles haven't been loaded onto the shipping container. They're stuck in Fort Lauderdale, something to do with the paperwork. And she said, leave it with me, don't worry. And like I said, she just keeps all the distractions away from me. So her, our PA, and two of my friends flew out to Fort Lauderdale, and they drove the vehicles 4,000 miles in 8 days.
Wow.
Yeah, so they drove from Fort Lauderdale through Mexico all the way down to Panama. So I broke the world record in Cartagena in the morning at 8 o'clock, took the noon flight to Panama, because that's the only bit you can't cross is the Darien Gap. And an hour later, Alana came in and just handed over the keys. So, everyone sees you on the bike, but I always talk about the team that people don't see. That was the success of this.
That's amazing. So what did you end up doing the whole thing in?
So I got into North America on day 70. And I was 14 days ahead of the world record. I'm like, perfect, I can relax. And I came into Del Rio, and I don't know what it was about getting into America. I don't know if it's because everyone spoke the language, food options were better, or, even security-wise, it was safer because, and all the issues should be now behind us. But Alana rang me after an hour getting in 5 times. So I'm thinking there's something wrong with the kids. And she rang me to say we've been invited to Harry and Meghan's wedding. I said, oh, that's nice. She goes, no, you don't realise you need to be finished by day 102. So going into that phone call, I was 14 days ahead. 10 minutes later, I'm now a day behind.
Wow.
So I had to change the way that I cycled in North America. And majority of my cycling was done at night when the winds had subsided. So I had 17 days planned for North America, cycling 11 and a half days from Texas to Canada.
Damn.
Yeah.
So, what does that break down to average miles per day?
So I finished it in 99 days, 12 hours and 56 minutes. Became the first man in history to do it under 100 days. So we had 5 days off, 3 due to weather and 2 logistics. So about 94 days. It worked out 147 miles a day.
Wow.
Yeah, for 94 days.
That's brutal, man.
Yeah.
That's impressive.
But more impressive, Alana raised nearly $1.4 million for the non-profit as well, which was just as impressive. Yeah.
Incredible. Man, you guys are a hell of a team. Tell you what, that's super inspiring and crazy impressive. During that trip, were you mostly eating whatever the local food was?
Yeah, when you're back in UK doing the planning, it's very easy to say, right, this is your nutrition plan. But when you're at the bottom end of the earth, it's whatever's available. It's ham and cheese baguette or cheese and ham, whichever way you look. But every border crossing we were going to, they were taking any fresh food offers.
Yeah.
So certain powders I could have, electrolytes. Yeah. But literally we're eating local food as the locals do, and that's why I got food poisoning in Peru, because the gas stations didn't have great food, and by the time we finished, the shops were all shut as well, and so we'd eat out, and so I got food poisoning twice. But because I had a tailwind, the cycling wasn't as laborious. Yeah.
Was there ever a point during that 100 days where you seriously considered quitting?
No, not at all. I think for me, the worst position I was in on that bike ride, I was 39 miles behind target on the first week. From then on, it was all gains. Yeah. And so I always made sure, especially on that first week, and I see people doing challenges at as well. And I always say, stay on that bike or in that canoe, whatever you're doing, and hit your target for the day, because you could be 10 miles behind today and then say, right, I'll catch up tomorrow, but you don't know what tomorrow's gonna bring. You could have another 30, be now 30 miles behind, but it plays with your headspace. And so as long as you're hitting your targets that you've set, then and going to bed at night, you're in the right headspace for the next day, you're where you should be. And so, like I say, after the first week, it was all gains then.
Yeah. It's almost a contest to how much more you can gain. Exactly.
I mean, I also had the opportunity to meet the 11 charities, and one of the charities was called Place to Be, and the £100,000 that they got at the end of this enabled 14,000 kids to speak to psychologists.
Wow.
So for me, I'm like, well, every mile I cycle means another child.
Yeah.
I mean, I would just drift away, listen to my music. But unlike other adventurers, they tend to have a team around them that do the planning, and they literally have to focus on their job on the bike computer. Because me and Alana were planning it together, I was daydreaming, thinking about the next second and third stage as well. So that was keeping me distracted and busy.
ABBA, listening to ABBA.
Depends what mood I was in. Yeah, Dancing Queen.
Yeah, that's awesome. Another Patreon question from Val, I think is fitting for right now, is what's been your number one motivation throughout everything that's been challenging in your life? Is there one, or is there multiple?
My number one motivation is I like to prove people wrong.
Yeah.
You know, there's been a few occasions in my life we talked on. My father told me I'd last 2 minutes.
Yeah.
Okay, so I use that as fire in my belly, to prove them wrong. As
long as your wife never threatens you with that.
Yeah. Well, she actually, my wife does it sometimes. She goes, well, if you can't do it, you can't do it. I'm like, it's like red rag to the bull.
That was me being a filthy bastard, saying you won't last 2 minutes.
True, yeah. But then we have, like the SBS. You can't be going SBS from the SAS guys. You do it. Doing the cycling challenge. There are a lot of people like, especially. My sponsorship marketing team did a SWOT analysis, the strengths, the weaknesses, the opportunities and threats. And the only weakness that came back was my arrogance towards the cycling community, which I took as a strength.
Yeah.
Because I didn't look like a cyclist. I wasn't your typical cyclist. I weighed 200 pounds and things like that. But no one actually from the cycling community ever said that. But I can imagine those adventurers who do this for a living would have been like, well, who's this guy coming into our world? But for me, I like to do it to prove a point and then find another sport.
Did you lose weight on that trip?
I lost a lot of weight. So when we were doing the planning, it was almost like a polar expedition. I was losing weight from day one to day end. Yeah. So I was burning 9,000 to 12,000 calories a day. But your body can only consume, as in eat, up to 7,000. The rest has to come through liquids. And then with the food poisoning, with the heat, especially Central America, the humidity and things like that. So I had everything from plus 47 degrees centigrade, which is like 120, high 120s, to minus 18 degrees centigrade in Alaska, and everything in between. And so I really didn't have a gauge to go off. The cycling community like to be 2 to 3% body fat, 100% fit for like the Tour de France and things like that. So the only reference I had was like, well, Special Forces Selection or Commando course or whatever. If you go on 100% fit, you'll burn out by week 2 or 3 on something so big. So you start that 75, 80% fit, struggle for the first couple of weeks, have a bit of timber on you, and then that will shred off and you use that. So that was what I did on this. And I burnt 12 kilos. I started at 90 kilos and went down to 78 at the end.
Wow. That's awesome. Super impressive. That's such a cool achievement. Toughest forces on earth.
Yeah.
How did that happen?
Yeah, this happened by accident. When I did the bike ride, I did it so I wasn't smuggling people out of countries. I literally only set up social media the week before I went on the bike ride. For me, it was always a taboo before. So I didn't see opportunities in TV or book opportunities and stuff like that. I was flying under the radar. My anonymity was still there. I mean, all of a sudden, you then became a public figure. But then when I was looking at, I still do a lot of the security stuff, which people don't realize behind the scenes. But when I look at other challenges, when I'm chatting to sponsors and brands, they're like, it doesn't matter how many world records you got or how many millions you've raised for society. It's like, how many Instagram followers you got? Is that really? Is that the world that we live in? And we do, unfortunately. And so for me, I thought, well, okay, if that's going to help, bring eyes to me, then when I do next challenges, it helps fundraise more money. So I actually was given an opportunity to do SAS Australia first in Australia with Clint. So Clint and I went and did that. But at the time, so on the bike ride, to help promote the bike ride, Prince Harry and I did a promo video together at Kensington Palace. And there was a girl, a lady there, Ashley, who was working on that production team. She was now working with this production team about to do toughest forces on earth. And so they needed special forces candidates. So she remembered me from that little video that we did. Oh, wow. And she reached out to Alana. Alana's like my manager. And she said, we're going to do this show. So they have another show called Inside World's Toughest Prisons. It's on its 7th season on Netflix. So it's sort of the same concept to that. And said, we want to put Dean's name forward. This is about 3 years ago. So they put my name forward and it went from 150 candidates down to me. And I said, well, that doesn't make sense. Because at the time I hadn't even done SAS Australia. I hadn't even done any TV. They said, oh, no, you look like you're the fittest. I was like, what's the premises of this show? Am I going to do selection 8 times over? But they were still trying to work that out. So yeah, they chose me, and then Netflix then said to the production company, "Oh, we were thinking more of an American guy." I was like, "Okay." So the production company, Dean's the guy. So I ended up flying to Dallas, and we did a chemistry test, and there was a Marine Raider there, a MARSOC guy, a Green Beret, and 2 SEALs, and Ryan Bates was one of the SEALs. And we were doing like some go-ruck stuff. We were doing like interviews. We were having barbecues together, just seeing what we're like and how we blended. And then came back, and Emma's like, "Look, Dean, you're still in. Who did you like?" And I said, Ryan and I bonded real. So Ryan then ended up coming on the show with me. And then right at the 11th hour, I don't know if you've ever heard of Top Gear. It's like an ultimate. This show's like Top Gear with guns, but you can't call it Top Guns. Yeah. And so the commissioner for the show actually worked on Top Gear back in back in the day, and he said two doesn't work. Yeah. You need 3, you need the full guy. Yeah. And so right at the 11th hour, the production company were like, right, we've got 2 candidates, and they found them on YouTube. They're basically YouTubers. And one of them was Cameron Thaff, who was a ranger, and he does a lot on military kit and sort of takes military kit, does reviews and stuff like that. So this guy comes on, he's got his hair slick, he's got a nose ring in. I'm like, is this for Pop Idol or what? And then, but this guy's very good in the camera, very confident. And so at the time I was like, okay. But now when we filmed it, I see how the dynamic works. It works really well, actually. Yeah. So I'm like the grumpy Jeremy Clarkson. Yeah. And you got Cameron, who's very good in front of the camera. Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. Top Gear is one of my favorite shows. I'm a big into cars and have been for a little while now. So that's always been something that's resonated with me. But that took like 2 years, right, of filming? Yeah.
Well, I say it was 3 years from the initial phone call to the end. We did our first episode in September 2022. Yeah. And actually, my daughter was, we started filming on the 25th of September. 26th of September. My daughter was born on the 24th of September.
Oh, wow.
So literally, we were told, because obviously visiting these military units, they've got their normal timetables as well. We had to slot in with them. And then, so by the time we got the first episode, they're like, yeah, we're going to start filming on the 25th. And I was like, well, Alana's giving birth. So literally, Alana gave birth on the 24th, 12 hours later on the Sunday. I'm flying out to Destin in Florida, and then we start filming on the 26th. Yeah. And then the last episode, we did eight countries. The last episode we filmed in September 23. So it's about a year for all 8 episodes.
Wow. From a, I guess, big picture standpoint, was there a unit that you guys worked with or that you showcased, I guess, that you would rate as the most overrated?
Most overrated? Overrated. Yeah. Oh, interesting.
You can say SEALs, it's fine.
Oh, well, we never visited the SEAL. Yeah, we never. So we did 8 countries. We did USA EOD. And then we did the Jungla Police in Colombia, the Mexican Special Forces, the Swedish Para Rangers who did their SERE course in the Arctic. Yeah. Then we had the Jordan, Austrian YAG Commando. They were really good. They were the only tier 1 unit on there, and I'd never even heard of them before. We had the Malaysian GGK, and who actually they formed part of the Green Beret from the Royal Marine Commando. So their TTPs was similar, and then the Filipino Navy SEALs, which was trained by the SEALs. So we had a real dynamic group, but each one was unique in itself, whether it's the environment that we were operating in. So it's hard to say what's the toughest force on earth, because if you took the Swedish Power Rangers, they were great in the Arctic, but would they be the same in the swamps in Malaysia? Yeah.
Of everybody that you guys visited and worked with or observed, if you had to pick one to go with you or to jump on to respond to something, who would it be? The Austrians?
The Austrians, yeah. I think for me, when we did the show, all the other units were great, and for me, I was very fortunate that everything we did I'd done before. I'd done the Arctic, the desert, the jungle. The only thing I hadn't done was the Malaysian swamp survival, which was strange. So, but for young Cameron, it was great. He did 4 years, and never went on he went to SERE actually as a medic, and so everything for him was new. He was loving it, but. When we got to Austria, these guys were tier 1. You could see it. You could just see it in the way they carried themselves. Yeah. Even behind the scenes, the logistics, the timings, and everything. A lot of the other places, there was the language barrier, but
Sure.
these guys were on point. And so I ended up doing the killing house with them, which I was used to in the SBS, and Cameron and Ryan ended up doing some medical stuff. But
that's cool.
just slotting into the team there, I sort of joked, they must have, average height of these guys was 6'4", and they had me slot in the middle. I was like, cheers. But we had a great bond with them.
Yeah. So I guess the way I'll phrase this question then is that if you were being held hostage of all the groups, who would you like the least to be in charge of coming to bail you out?
Cameron and Ryan.
Unit-wise.
Yeah, unit-wise. Really interesting. I don't want to name any of them actually. Yeah, but it was actually what was really interesting was, which caught me out, was when we went to Colombia. These guys are actually police. Yeah. But they're hey-ho trained. They had more equipment than some of the units we even visited.
Oh wow!
But their enemy was on their doorstep.
Yeah.
They were fighting at home. But one thing that caught me out with them is the fact that they have to be law enforcement first. And it was the same with the Mexicans. When we went to Mexico, these guys, they were saying when they go in the room and someone's got a weapon, for us back in the day, if someone's got a weapon, they're good to go. But for them, they're not allowed to shoot unless they actually generally are shooting at them, because some people are holding weapons because they've got their families. They're using, so that was really interesting. Yeah. Because we're normally flying overseas to fight an enemy, whereas Mexico and Colombians, theirs was on their doorstep. Yeah. And so that's why they had to maintain their anonymity. Same with the Austrians as well.
Yeah. Wow. Man, such a fascinating career and life you've lived. Is there anything that I haven't asked you that I should have?
No, everyone asks me what next. Yeah. So for me, I don't have any, we always like to have plans. There'll be future challenges. I like to, like I said, right at the beginning of this podcast, your body's like a river. You need to keep moving. I don't want to stop now. The Netflix show it's been great. We had 10 million views in the first week. And nice. A lot of people are saying, is there a season 2? I'd like to do a season 2 because, when I went into this show, I wasn't arrogant, but I didn't really have an understanding of other special forces units, if that made sense. And so that really opened my eyes, and I want to learn more about them. I want to maintain the fitness and try and I'm doing a military fitness app at the moment, which I can share with people. Oh, nice. Yeah, and also, as we touched on earlier, sort of celebrate your successes and also be a father. It's trying to get that yin. Before me and my wife got the yin and yang balance wrong. Yeah. It's trying to get that. So everyone, because my kids actually don't even realize I'm in the military. That's why I did the Netflix show. They don't believe. Yeah, they don't believe it. Yeah,
they're like, what the fuck's that?
My son thinks I work in Burger King. Generally, yeah.
That's awesome. Man, good stuff. Well, thanks for taking the time to come and share your story. It's a fascinating one. We do have something for you here.
Oh, thank you.
As a gift of the show.
Amazing.
Got the kind of the standard coin on top, and then
oh wow,
yeah,
belt buckle. Here we go.
So you can now that you're in America, you can throw some shit kickers on and and hit the belt buckle up. Thanks to John Johnston in California, who donates them, and Champion Choice Silver here in Texas that makes those.
That's amazing. Thank you. Yeah.
Anything else you want to mention before we wrap up?
Speaking of silver, actually, I only found out 12 days ago that I was honoured on the King's birthday honours list. Yeah. Yeah, so I'm now a member of the Order of the British Empire as well.
Yeah, so I'd meant to bring that up. I appreciate you reminding me. What is the deal with that, I guess, in terms of how you get selected and the different orders and what they mean? Yeah,
so the MBE sounds very archaic, It's a member of the Order of the British Empire. So there's 4 levels. So there's people that get awarded, and there's different levels of the MBE, CBE, OBE, and then being a sir or a knight or a lady. And then normally you have like former prime ministers, professional sports, the people from who are experts in their field, actors and stuff like that. But then there's also people from the general public, who work behind the scenes, whether it's in charity. A lot of it's the charitable stuff. So my wife actually got awarded 18 months ago for her services to vulnerable women, human trafficking, and mental health awareness, because she raised all that money, which to me was huge, because people, as we talked about, people would see me, but then she was being credited for the stuff she did behind the scenes. And so I was more excited with her on that. And people nominate, I don't know how the process works. And so when I got announced 2 weeks ago, she was more excited than I was. What I was pleased about was I was chatting to one of the head of stations for CIA a few months back. I've just Googled you. And I said, look, don't Google me. I said, there's two Dean Stotts. There's the one that the world sees on social media, the TV and stuff like that. That's 30% of what I do. 70% of what I do, the world doesn't see. And so what I liked about this MBE, I actually got it for my services to sport, to humanitarian, and to mental health awareness. So it wasn't just the charitable angle, it was also the professional angle as well. So it's the charitable stuff that the world saw, but then the professional stuff that they didn't see. So awesome. It's a great honor and very unique. That I do know a couple of husband and wives that had it, but for the same reason. Yeah. But for us both to have it separate for different reasons is very unique. Yeah.
That's awesome. Is there a ceremony for it?
So you have an investiture. So what we did with my wife is we actually flew back to Scotland. And you have Buckingham Palace in UK, but the king was getting coronated in Scotland on the day. And so we went to Holyrood Palace and we did the whole bells and whistles. My son was in a kilt, or he calls it a quilt. I was in a kilt. My daughter was dressed up. My Bentley gave us a car and we went to the palace. And you're only allowed 3 invitations. So my father-in-law went in fact, you're only allowed 2 invitations. My father-in-law went. He said, I'm definitely going. I'm like, well, which one of the kids do we take? Because my youngest, she couldn't come anyway. So I pulled in the favourite at the palace and we got an extra seat. So my son and daughter could go. So yeah, we went to Holyrood Palace and then my wife did. And there's everyone else who's got it goes there as well. I mean, she has her one-on-one with the king. He presents her with a medal, puts on her chest and has a little conversation. Man. That's what she's doing. So a great time for the family. You can have the option to do it in your local place. So I'll probably do it in the British Embassy I said Benghazi then, the British Embassy in LA and have a garden party because, we did all that, which is great. But I know the Americans love that sort of culture, so I sort of want to bring some of that here to the US.
So who would present it to you there then?
It'd probably be the ambassador. Yeah. I have a ginger friend who lives up the road, so maybe he can come in.
Do you know about how many people have been awarded that?
I don't know, and I probably need to do a bit more research. My father actually got awarded the British Empire Medal 40 years ago.
Oh, wow.
And so, for him, it's so when you, on your signature block on your name, those 3 letters stay behind your name. So it's like Dean Stott, MBE, which would be great.
What an honor, man. That's super cool.
No, I'm pleased.
Yeah, good stuff. Anything else?
That's it.
To the viewer, can't thank you guys enough for your continued support show after show. I hope you enjoyed Dean's story. I know I sure as hell did. I feel like I could ask you 4 more hours of questions of just about living in England, period, because I'm fascinated by that kind of stuff. But thank you guys. Appreciate it. Hope you enjoyed it. If you didn't, you can choke yourself. And until next time, this is Mic Drop.